welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is the next episode, I guess, in my deep dive of the Steven Avery case. So we are doing the truth behind Making a Murderer, Wisconsin versus Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey. Right now we're on the Steven Avery case, or we're coming back to it. We just watched all of the interrogations of Brendan Dassey, all 7 of them, including the one that was done by the investigator in the case of his public defender's investigator did a polygraph and then basically coerced another confession out of Brendan for some reason. So everybody wanted to get a confession out of Brendan, apparently. At least the Manitowoc police did. Or what is Fassbender? I'm not sure. He's Manitowoc County? Fassbender and Uyghur. One of them's Calumet County and one of them's Manitowoc, I think. I can't remember. There's so many details in all these cases, and I'm covering this case, I'm covering Karen Reed, I'm covering Delphi and Idaho 4. Not to mention, like, other things that pop up here and there. So, it's just hard to keep everything straight. So, I try. Anyways, so this is going to be day 1 of the transcript. As you can see in front of, or on the screen, that's day 1 jury trial transcript. Unfortunately, we don't have video of the trial, at least not anywhere accessible to us. It might exist somewhere. Hopefully, I mean, I assume it does because the filmmakers of Making a Murderer obtained it, so I don't know. But hopefully one day we get it. Until then, you unfortunately have to listen to my voice as I read through the opening statements of this trial. So we're going to hear from Ken Kratz, who is the special prosecutor. So here, let me go through who we have. This, by the way, this takes place February 12th, 2007. We are going to be doing day 1. That's February 12th, 2007. Our judge is Patrick L. Willis. We have appearances by, and if you look at the thumbnail that I have up on the screen, biggest head to little head inward. So biggest head is Kenneth Kratz. Next to him with the glasses is Thomas Fallon. And next to him is Norman Gunn. All 3 of those are special prosecutors assigned to the case on behalf of the state of Wisconsin. So, I don't know, whatever. And then continuing on, we have Dean Strang, and then we have Jerry Buting, who are the defense team for Steven Avery. And their faces probably look familiar if you watched Making a Murderer. And of course, we had Steven Avery appear in person too. So I am going to skip all the jury instructions and things like that happen in the proceedings. We're not going to go through, by the way. The trial went for like 20 something days, so we're not going to go through every single day. I'm going to pick apart, so this episode is just going to be the opening statements, and then I'm going to, just for future episodes, pick out the different portions of testimony, or at least, people that did testify. I'll pick out their testimony and read through that. So we'll go through like the key witnesses and all, the main people, the important people, the people we've talked about already in this case, and I'm sure there'll be more. But I just wanted to let you know, we're not going to read the whole thing, and I might skip through, I am definitely skipping through parts of, especially Ken Kratz's opening statement, because he is wordy, kind of like I'm being right now. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop talking. Housekeeping. Please hit the like button before we dive in. Subscribe, comment, all those great things. It helps the algorithm and helps you and me at the same time. So it's good for both of us. So let's dive in to Ken Kratz's opening statement. The judge says, "You may be seated, members of this jury. At this time, we're going to hear the opening statement from the state. Mr. Kratz, you may begin." Attorney Kratz says, "Thank you, Judge. May it please..." Oh, sorry, I was up too high. I should read this screen. It's just too small for me. Let me hold on. My eyesight's bad, guys. Not that I can't see it, it's just that the smaller it is, the more my eyes have to strain to read it, and it just hurts my eyes. All right. So that's better. That's better. All right. There we go. Attorney Kratz says, "Thank you, Judge. May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Strang, Mr. Buting, Mr. Avery, good morning, good morning. We're all a little nervous this morning," which I think is a really weird comment that he starts off by, "We're all a little bit nervous this morning." I mean, that's weird, don't you think? Like, why would the jury be nervous? I don't know. I mean, maybe like just nerves of being somewhere new in a place where they don't know what is expected of them, but really they just have to sit and listen. So that's all they have to really do is pay attention. But for the attorney, I could see that he would be nervous for Mr. Kratz, but I don't know why everybody's, I don't know. It's just weird. A weird comment, I thought, to make first thing to the jury. Anyways. And I think that if we admit that, we, being the lawyers and the jurors asked to decide this important matter, I think we're all going to be better off. If we admit that we're nervous? What, Ken Kratz? Yeah, I don't get it. And on behalf of the state, let me first start by thanking you for your jury service, thanking you for your attention that you are about to give in this case, and thanking you, I have to read here, sorry. Remind myself, and thanking you in detail for what in jury selection we've talked about may perhaps be the most important decision of your life that you will ever make, or however he words it. He's very dramatic and wordy, and that's why I'm going to skip through a lot. You will note that we have already introduced that there are 3 attorneys on the defense, myself, Ken Kratz, and the Calumet County District Attorney. This is my courthouse, he says, my courthouse. Even though it's not his courthouse, it's actually the people's courthouse, and it's the court's room right now, so you, Ken Kratz, don't have anything. But he says this is my courthouse. And I'm joined by Mr. Fallon, who is seated directly to my right. Remember the one in the glasses in the thumbnail that you see on the screen. Mr. Fallon is an Assistant Attorney General with the Department of Justice, and joining us also is Mr. Norm Gahn. He's like a DNA expert guy or something. All right, so good morning. Mr. Gahn is an Assistant District Attorney in Milwaukee County. You will learn that each of us are special prosecutors in this case, but what's so special about a special prosecutor? Why would some small town from Chilton be in charge of this entire prosecution? Small town lawyer, from Chilton be in charge of this entire prosecution, this big of a case. Why would Ken Kratz be asked to lead up this prosecution? We'll talk about how this case was assigned over, but just understand, at least for this person, that although we are all experienced prosecutors, we're doing a favor for Manitowoc County. Just so you know, we're doing a favor for your county. Like, he comes off so condescending and rude. I'm sorry. Like, I've gotten 2 paragraphs in, and he's already annoying me the way that he's talking to these jurors. We're doing a favor for Manitowoc County. It's a rather big favor for Manitowoc County, but it's a favor nonetheless. It is helping the Manitowoc County District Attorney's Office in presenting this case. Mr. Rohrer, your district attorney, asked me to take over the case early on. You will learn about when that happened, but it is still something that we were simply asked to and did in fact perform. Do you see how wordy he is? Like, I could have avoided that whole paragraph. There's 2 investigators in this case now. You are going to hear that there were hundreds of law enforcement officers involved in this investigation, but these kinds of cases require direction. So if there were hundreds of law officers that were involved in this case, why the heck did you need people from Manitowoc County like Colburn and Kasarek, I think, like the old chief, the names that, weren't supposed to be on the property, but yet they were? So why, if you had hundreds of law enforcement officers that could have been at the scene, then why did you need to use people that were supposed to be recused from the case? So there's 2 investigators in this case. Now, you were going to hear there were hundreds of law enforcement officers involved, but these kinds of cases require direction. They require leadership by law enforcement officials that that have experience. The first lead investigator in this case who is sitting in the courtroom is Mark Wiegert. Good morning, he says. Mr. Wiegert is an investigator with the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. And Mr. Wiegert, Mark Wiegert, if that name sounds familiar, he was one of the investigators who interrogated Brendan Dassey in the infamous video, the one that they also share on Netflix, which would be his 5th interview with law enforcement, I believe. Yeah, so that was his 5th interview. By that time, they had broken him down so much he didn't know what to say, except anything that they told him to say. All right, so the other lead investigator in this case is Tom Fassbender. And you might recognize his name because he was the other investigator that was interrogating Brendan Dassey. So now you know who those 2 are. Mr. Fassbender works for the Department of Justice. Okay, so one's Calumet County. That's where I was wrong. Mr. Fassbender works for Department of Justice. He works for the enforcement branch of the Department of Justice, which is called the Division of Criminal Investigation. And again, knowing who we are, knowing who the 5 of us are, the prosecution team, we hope may help in determining what's important in these cases. He just included law enforcement as part of the prosecution team, which is in no way, shape, or form how our justice system is supposed to be. The law, like the criminal justice side and the law, I don't know. I mean, so what would you say? Like the court system is totally different than your law enforcement. Is totally different branches. They should not be. I mean, they always work together in conjunction, but they shouldn't be combined into thinking that it's a prosecution team, because they're not. Law enforcement is only supposed to do the investigation, hand it over to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor is supposed to decide if he has enough information to press charges on someone. The law enforcement arm of the law does not have that ability. So the fact that they're working in conjunction, or saying that, the prosecution team, but it consists of law enforcement officers as well, that really means, like, to me, that means I'm the puppet master and they're working for me. Like, that's what that means, because usually law enforcement is supposed to be its own separate thing in regards to sorry, my nose always itches all the time. Anyways, but okay, so they hope in helping the jury understand. Okay, so the judge has told you, at least in brief terms, what an opening statement is, but oftentimes experience comes in bits and pieces, especially in a 6-week trial. So I don't think it lasted that long, but it did last a while. So I think it was like 20 something days, I said. All right, so that isn't something that you will expect all of the evidence to come at you at once. And so If we can provide a roadmap or an overview of what the evidence is going to show you, that should be helpful. And then he starts talking about a jigsaw puzzle. I should have blocked all that out because he calls, it's like looking at the cover of a jigsaw puzzle. You have that cover which helps guide you when you're putting your puzzle together. That's what he claims his opening statement is going to be to them. This is your picture to the puzzle. So you can put all the pieces together. It's a good analogy, but I just hate Ken crayons. Now, before I go any further, I want to talk to you about something that I know some of you in your specific questions expressed as some concern, and that's the nature of the evidence that's going to be presented. This is a very, very serious crime and potentially has very, very graphic kinds of details that may be involved or may be presented. But there is some uncertainty about how much evidence is going to be presented, and I wanted to assure you as the lead prosecutor, as the person responsible for the presentation of the case, a couple of things. Number one, and perhaps the most important for you as the jury, I'm only going to present those pieces of evidence that are necessary, those pieces that are necessary to tell you the entire story. My job is not to present gruesome or overly graphic information for you. What do you think? I think he tries to be overly dramatic, overly flowerful with his words. I think he's trying to be gruesome by saying that it's gruesome and there's details that are gruesome. He's trying to spark some kind of emotion out of people. And I really believe that he is doing it, for attention, for, grabbing their attention, getting them fired up. And I think as we go through this process, you are going to find that the evidence is pretty straightforward. It is not necessarily gruesome or graphic, isn't something that you should fear at this stage, all right? And then he goes on and talking about how the Halbach family has seen all of this graphic material, so don't worry about them. And he goes on for a while about that, so I don't know. The judge I didn't mean to read. I didn't mean that part to be yellow. All right, so the judge has told you that there's 4 charges. I'm very, very briefly going to talk about those 4 because I don't want to reiterate what the judge did. But there are 4 separate charges that the defendant is charged with: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, felon in possession of a firearm, and false imprisonment, which I don't think could have ever been proven. It was never proven, but yet he got convicted of it. Spoiler alert, if you didn't know. All right, so now the judge instructed you and my job today in opening statement, again, that this isn't evidence, but it is a help for you. It's the cover, if you will. It's the roadmap. It's the overview. It's the jigsaw puzzle picture to talk about the first legal concept that you as a jury has to understand, and that's the concept being a party to the crime. The judge has told you that that can be satisfied either if the defendant committed an offense himself or if the defendant aided and abetted another in the commission of the offense. Now, the first 2 counts, the homicide and the mutilation of a corpse, are charged as a party to the crime. And so you will learn at the conclusion of the case 6 weeks from now, if you fast forward 6 weeks from now, that the jury instructions will tell you that if the defendant committed any of those elements himself, or if the defendant aided and abetted another in the commission of those offenses, that you can and should find him guilty. Now, I can't stand up here and predict what the defense is going to bring into this case, what cross-examination they may enter, or if they even choose to present any kind of defense, nor should I. That isn't my job. My job as the prosecutor is to present our case, to present the physical evidence, blah, blah, blah. Get out of here. Okay, so the judge also told you about elements of the offense. The state has a burden of proof. The defense has absolutely no burden. Our burden is to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge explained to you already that beyond a reasonable doubt means a doubt for which a reason can be given when considering all of the evidence. Let me tell you what is not, though. Reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, is not beyond all doubt. It's not 100%. And when we are dealing with a human justice system, you can't expect beyond all doubt or beyond a shadow of a doubt or comments sometimes that we have heard about that. What? What? I don't know. All right, so it's beyond a reasonable doubt, a doubt for which a reason can be given, and I'm standing before you, members of the jury, telling you that I accept that burden. I will prove this. Hold on, where was I? I will prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, but we didn't want you going into this case expecting 100% or beyond all doubt, because there are human factors or dynamics that go into these cases. Each charge, the judge told you, has elements of those offense. We're going to go through those in just a minute, but also each of the 4 charges should be considered separately. You shouldn't group them together and decide if he's guilty of one, then he's guilty of all 4 or none. Each of the 4 counts has to be considered separately, and in fact, there is separate evidence for all of the 4 counts. And finally, the defendant is presumed innocent. Mr. Avery sits here today because you have heard no evidence in this case. He is presumed by you, or should be presumed by you, to be innocent. However, and this is a big however, the presumption disappears at the very moment when the evidence in this case satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty of the offense. That is factually, legally wrong. Mistrial could have been had right here. I think he could have called a mistrial at the very moment. Not necessarily that it would have been granted, but that's not the case. The judge always instructs the jury not to make up your decision, not to make a decision until you reach deliberation. Don't decide anything until you reach deliberation. He's telling you you can make a decision once something satisfies that all reasonable doubt, and then you can be biased then the rest of the trial if you want. Basically, is what that says. So, the presumption disappears at the moment that the evidence proves that he is guilty, and that's not true. Again. But we'll hear more about that in a minute. That's why I really wanted to bring that up. Okay, so count 1. The judge instructed you has 2 elements, and why I'm telling you this and why I'm showing them on the screen or on a PowerPoint presentation is because these are serious, serious crimes. In fact, the most serious crimes that we have in the state of Wisconsin. Then he goes into like all this legal jargon concept stuff, and a lot of it didn't make all that much sense. False imprisonment, he talks about. Basically, like a lot of this, I don't know. I'm going to skip that. He even says, enough of the civics lesson. Let's talk about what the evidence is going to show. On Monday, October 31st, 2005, beginning at approximately 2:45 p.m., the state intends to prove to you that the defendant restrained, unalived, and mutilated a 25-year-old photographer named Teresa Halbach. We're going to prove to you that happened. We're going to prove to you who committed this crime. We're going to prove to you where it happened. We're going to prove to you when specifically it happened, and those will prove all of the elements of the offense. What we're not going to prove to you, what the judge has already told you we don't have to, and in fact can't prove to you, is why. We can't prove the why in this case like this. That's called motive. You can't come up with a motive for why he would want to do that. That's why they grilled Steven for so long. Why would he do that? Why would your uncle do that? Yeah, I don't know. Sorry guys, I feel so stuffy today. Like my nose is stuffy. All right. So we can't prove the why in a case like this. That's called motive, the reason behind the unaliving, and what was in Mr. Avery's mind when he decided to unalive this lovely young woman. You know what is messed up is that if you are the state trying to prove that someone ended someone's life, you don't have to prove motive. But if you're the defendant saying, hey, I'm innocent and I believe somebody else did this, you have to prove like motive, means, opportunity. You have to come up with like a bunch of requirements to like put forth a third party culprit defense, which I get why there should be requirements, but I mean, it is like jumping through hoops more for the defense just to like defend yourself. Whereas the state doesn't have to prove motive. It's mind-boggling how messed up our criminal justice system is. But whatever, let's continue. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to somebody. This remarkable young woman was 25 years of age. She was single. She was a freelance photographer. She had her own photography business that was, although in its infancy, was doing quite well. This woman, and I will remind you several times in this opening and throughout the trial, I will remind you that we're talking about a real person. We're talking about somebody's daughter, sister, a lot of people's friend. Teresa Halbach had her whole life in front of her, and the evidence is going to show that on Halloween of 2005, that all ended. That ended in the hands of the defendant, Steven Avery. It's such a big case with such a big job that we have to try to present all of this investigation. I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to start talking about the investigation itself. Ms. Halbach was reported missing on the 3rd of November 2005. Ms. Halbach, by her mother. Ms. Halbach worked for at least part of her photography business was that she worked for a publication called Auto Trader magazine. You are going to learn through the case, and you are going to hear from several witnesses from Auto Trader, that it is a magazine, basically is responsible for selling automobiles, some other things, trailers, and the like, but mostly automobiles. And it's a publication that Teresa supplemented her income with. It's not that the magazine is trying to sell the vehicles. It is people advertising to sell their auto or their motor vehicles. And then, yeah, it's like putting an ad in a paper, but specifically for people looking to buy and trade cars. So you can imagine that Avery had some cars that, from the Avery auto salvage yard. I'm sure there were cars that they would fix up and sell and make a little extra money on. Anyways, so, where was I? Auto Trader magazine, where she supplemented her income. Okay. Teresa was mostly responsible or mostly enjoyed taking photographs of weddings, and was already developing quite a niche and quite a specialty, taking pictures of little kids, of babies and young children. But to supplement her young business, she worked for Auto Trader magazine. So to understand how this case transforms from a missing person investigation into what became one of the largest criminal investigations in Wisconsin history, starting from the beginning, we're starting from the investigation, is important for you to understand. Okay. The investigation determined that Teresa Halbach took 3 pictures, or at least had 3 business stops on the 31st of October. Now, one of those were a person by the name of Mr. Schmitz, one of those was a person by the name of Mr. Zibberer, and the third and the last stop that she made late in the afternoon on the 31st was at the Steven Avery salvage property. So the investigation early on determined that this man, Steven Avery, called Auto Trader magazine at 8:12 that morning on that very day. On the 31st of October, Mr. Avery asked specifically that the same woman who had been out here before, the same woman who on at least 6 and perhaps more occasions had come out to take pictures. Mr. Avery wanted her out there that afternoon. Now, two very critical findings very early on in this investigation came to light. Number one, that Steven Avery had the one who lured Ms. Halbach out to the property on the 1st. He legitimately called a business to provide a service for him. I don't know how that's luring someone out to the property, but he legitimately called a magazine, a business, and he requested service from them. That's not luring someone out. And it's on record that he did it, so it's not very smart. He had her personal phone number. He could have just called her if he wanted her to come out and not be caught right away, So it doesn't make sense that he would call the Auto Trader magazine. I believe he had done a hustle shot with her before, or at least he had her number somehow, and he could have easily set up something privately. But because he lured her there through her place of employment through a legitimate way that he could be tracked, I guess he was trying to lure her there and end her life. I don't know. And number two, and perhaps most importantly, Steven Avery was the last person to see Teresa Halbach alive. And I've never understood that saying, because the last person to see someone alive is obviously the person that ended their lives. If it's a homicide. So how do we know? It can't be Steven if Steven wasn't the person. It can't, the last person to have seen Teresa would have been the person who ended her life, but whatever. So who is this man? And you can't definitively say right now that it's Steven. And you just said that he has a presumption of innocence. Whatever, this guy. All right, so who is this man? The judge told you that there was a lawsuit which was filed against Manitowoc County, and many of you, in fact, virtually all of you, knew something about Steven Avery before serving on this particular jury. Mr. Avery achieved some degree of notoriety back in 2003 when he was exonerated for a 1985 SA conviction. You should know that exoneration was based upon DNA evidence. You should know that DNA evidence was performed by the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, and it was performed by an analyst, the head of the DNA unit in Madison, the woman by the name of Sherry Colhane. And remember that name, because she's coming back. All right, so Mr. Avery, as you already heard, later filed a civil suit against Manitowoc County seeking compensation, seeking money for the time that he was wrongfully convicted. And he can't even say he was wrongfully convicted. It's like pulling teeth for it to come out. And it's that degree of notoriety, that's how Mr. Avery comes to you in this case, that may or may not have some things to do with this case. Now, we understand, and the evidence is going to be clear, that Mr. Avery shouldn't have been convicted in 1985 based upon eyewitness or mistaken eyewitness testimony. Basically, the law enforcement that came to ask Penny, the person who was brutally attacked, who had not a real great memory of her attacker, but when she started making some descriptions, the woman who was best friends of the woman who lived across the street from the Averys, who hated the Averys, said, oh, that sounds like Steven. And so she pinned it on him early on. They implanted false memories into Penny by showing pictures of Steven, making it, seem like it was this person, whatever. And then she identified him twice in lineups because he was the only one that she had seen his picture before. She had seen, sketch of his picture before or whatever. And then the sketch artist was the sheriff. I think it was the sheriff, and he made it in Steven's likeness. He made the whatchamacallit, sketch. The suspect sketch. In he drew his very first one for the first time ever, and it looked exactly identical to Steven Avery's mugshot from years prior. So I don't know, you tell me what's going on here. Anyways, so yeah, mistaken eyewitness testimony. There wasn't any DNA evidence. At least the DNA analysis wasn't to the level or to the point that it is now. Certainly isn't anything like you're going to hear about in this case, and in fact should have been exonerated and was in 2003. So he should have been exonerated prior to that in 1985, but because technology wasn't there, that's why he got put away. This is what Ken Kratz is saying, but that's not what happened. Yes, I mean, if they had DNA and he was excluded, then fine, but that's not the case. And because we didn't have that, you have to rely on good investigative work. Oops. Something on my chair slid and fell. Whoops. All right, so moving on. We'll also tell you, and at the close of this case, I'm going to point to every one of you presenting jurors to say that has nothing to do with this case. So nothing, that civil suit with Steven has nothing to do with this case at all whatsoever. They proclaim that a lot. Sorry, I'm thirsty. All right. When deciding who is accountable for the unaliving of 25-year-old Teresa Halbach, Mr. Avery's past and his past exoneration have nothing to do with this case. Now I'm going to skip through a bunch of this because this is I can't remember. Oh, they're talking about the missing persons investigation and how there's nothing wrong with the fact that Manitowoc County was involved in the missing persons case because it wasn't, Steven wasn't a suspect until afterwards. So, whatever. That's basically some of the argument. So now you are going to hear the Manitowoc County officials remained involved in the case. So they were supposed to be taken off. They were supposed to be recused. I skipped through parts of that where he was explaining because of that civil suit, people from Manitowoc County were supposed to have been excused. However, you're going to hear that many Manitowoc County officials remain involved in the case. They remain involved in the investigation that when manpower, and we are going to be talking about how many police officers were necessary, that they remain in a helping or a supportive role. But the case is, in fact, turned over to Calumet County. So technically, Calumet County has the case. We're just there as a support team, whatever they need us to do. And we are following their rules. Now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's that hint of impropriety there where you shouldn't be in a case. You shouldn't be investigating a case that you're in a civil suit for. It's just mind-boggling that they were allowed to go. I know I've said mind-boggling a couple times now, but this case is mind-boggling. So this particular photograph I want you to look at for quite a bit of time. So he's showing an exhibit. This is the Avery Salvage Yard located in the town of Gibson. This is a photo you're going to see a lot during the course of this case, and this is for the next 6 weeks a property that you're going to come to know very well. And so as Mr. Fallon and Mr. Gahn and I were talking about the opening statement, we thought it appropriate we introduce you to the Avery Salvage Yard. First of all, it's a 40-acre property. The entire square here is 40 acres. And I'm going to skip through it because we've gone through on the map in my deep dive in other episodes, the layout of the property, how multiple people have trailers and live on the property, including Steven, including Chuck, including Barb and her family, her boys. At the time, she was not married to Scott Toddick. So it was just her and her kids. All right, so now you are going to hear that surrounding this property on 3 sides was an active working... Whoops, sorry, I was up a little too low, too high. An active working gravel quarry, and so we're going to have some larger aerial photos that we're going to show you in just a minute. But just to give you an idea of what's around this property, not just the 40 acres of search area, but hundreds of acres that surround that were also included in the search. All right, so yes, they had a 40-acre property. They had over 4,000 cars on the property. And around the property is a very large quarry. There were multiple burn sites in the quarry, which I believe is where Teresa was actually burned. And then remains of the burns were placed in Steven's burn pit and his burn barrel. That's what I think. I think she was attacked later down the road. I do think she left the Steven Avery property, and someone, maybe Bobby Dassey, pulled her over to the side for a hustle shot. With the ruse of a hustle shot, and attacked her on the side of the road where her Jeep, I believe, could have been hidden out of view, and then with her body in it until they had time to go to the quarry, burn it, whatever, do what they needed to do. And then set up Avery, knowing full well that if you set it up on Avery, the Manitowoc County Police would never want to back down from that angle. I don't know. It's just, if it is his nephew and potentially Scott Toddick, I'm not saying it is, but if it is, that's so cruel to do to your own family member. And then Brendan takes the fall for it. Your young baby brother who is so innocent and sweet, and then you just, let him take the fall for it, if that's what happened. I don't know. So we got this giant quarry. It's 40 acres of search area. Members of the jury, the evidence is going to show you are going to hear from officers when they talk about the search efforts in this case that a search area this size is nothing short of overwhelming. All right, all of the pieces that the officers can look at is absolutely overwhelming. If you know anything about the case, you will understand this event. But on Saturday, the 5th of November, Pam and Nicole Sturm, two citizen searchers, and also the cousins of Teresa Halbach. I'm surprised he doesn't say that, but he wants to make them seem a little more distant because it's a bizarre, mysterious way. Or it is bizarre and mysterious how they found it so fast. That's all I'm going to say. I think they were led to it or told where to go. Anyway, so these two searchers were given permission and did search the Avery salvage property. Pam and Nicole found the needle in the haystack within 15 minutes of 4,000 vehicles. Come on, guys. Pam and Nicole Sturm found the one vehicle on the property that all of the citizen searchers that you are going to hear about were looking for. Now, there are several things that the evidence is going to show, and as you look at this photograph, several things about the attempts at whoever placed this vehicle here to disguise it, to hide it, attempts to obscure its direction. You are going to learn, members of the jury, through this evidence in the case, that the vehicle was locked, and the 4 doors on this vehicle were locked when Pam and Nicole came upon it. You are going to learn that the license plates were removed. Both the front and the back license plates were removed from the vehicle. You are going to learn that the battery was disconnected, and you are going to learn that the vehicle identification number was necessary to, in fact, identify that this is Teresa's vehicle. Now the evidence is going to show you were on the property. Teresa Halbach's vehicle was found. It was found in, not accidentally, the furthest point from the defendant's trailer Again, you are going to find that it was intentionally obscured, that it had immediate access to something called a car crusher on the property. And again, just to orient you, Steven's trailer is in the lower left-hand portion of this particular photo. He's looking at a display. Where it was found was not an accident. We'll also tell you during the course of the introduction of the testimony that it's important where it wasn't found. It wasn't found on a roadway, wasn't found in some mall parking lot. It wasn't found on the Avery salvage property, the family business. It was found on the It was found on the Avery salvage property, the family business. I talked about the car crusher. You will hear a little bit about that piece of equipment that was near or right next to Teresa Halbach's vehicle. You're going to learn, and you are going to hear with evidence sometime through the 6 weeks how this piece of equipment works, how a regular looking vehicle, car, SUV, truck, starts out looking like a regular vehicle and ends up flattened or smashed. You are going to learn why it's important that Teresa's vehicle was next to the car crusher. It wasn't next to the car crusher. It was in that vicinity of the property, but it was not found directly next to the car crusher, like it was ready to go on or something. So you're going to learn why it's important that it was next to the car crusher, and you're going to learn the numbers of crushed vehicles and how easily Teresa Halbach's vehicle could have never been found in this case. Yeah, and he could have also put her body in there too, and she never would have been found. And he didn't do that. I mean, he had access to. So you burn her instead? That doesn't make sense when you could have crushed her. She could have been slipped in between, if you will, one of those cars. So yeah, her car could have been just, gone in the oblivion of other flattened cars on the property. You will hear about a lot of professionals that were asked to perform assistance in this case. You are going to hear about law enforcement professionals, And the professionals have 2 legs. Some of them have 4. One named Brutus, who's a search and rescue cadaver dog. What Brutus does is one thing. Brutus is highly trained. He finds, he detects the scent of a deceased person. We're going to skip through all of this. This is more of Brutus and where he marked and where he didn't. But honestly, it doesn't matter because they brought him back to this crusher like 3 times. He never marked there. They just wanted to get him on that crusher for some reason. And Brutus, the dog, there multiple dogs searched the property, and none of them went there. The only places that they went were Teresa's vehicle and wherever bones were found on the property. That's the only places that the dog identified a spot, a match, the scent of someone who had been deceased. It was Teresa's car and the burn pits in the quarry and on Steven Avery's property. All right, so now you saw the size of the Avery salvage property. You are going to hear testimony from Mr. Fassbender. He's going to provide you with an idea about the methodology, about the plan, the search plan in this case. You are going to hear Agent Fassbender talk about missing persons investigations and when they go from missing persons to criminal investigations, how their thought processes change. But at that early stage, when they find the vehicle, when they don't know that there is NEBL-OOD in the back of the vehicle, when they don't know that if there's a body involved in this case, that Agent Fassbender and every other law enforcement officer you will hear at this scene had one thing in their mind, and that was to find Teresa. The job of the police at the time was to find Karen Halbach's daughter, and you are going to hear the evidence that the officers made very, very quick work of searching all of the residences on the Avery salvage property, because they went and got a search warrant immediately and went and started searching. It's like they were just waiting to get in there. So all 4 residences and the outbuildings they searched. They are searching for Teresa Halbach, and the search plan again is to find the victim's vehicle, but a secondary obligation of theirs is to also look for obvious signs of evidence. So basically they went through and did a sweep of every single car, every single one, and opened them up, looked for Teresa, 4,000 vehicles. And they sent the dog out in the rain to go look for those vehicles to see if there was any evidence. But basically the first search is they're looking for a body. They go back out and search the property a second time looking for anything of evidentiary value. Why wouldn't you be looking for both at the same time while you're doing your search? That doesn't make sense to me. They did 2 searches of all of the cars. And the second search, they found a license plate, which belonged to Teresa. All right, so please recall at this early stage, the police don't know what they're looking for yet, and they don't really have any idea of the kinds of things that they're looking for. So when you remember this search plan, you will hear evidence of some officers may even call it a funnel approach. Nothing fancy about calling it the funnel approach. It makes sense. It's just a way to describe search efforts. It is actually an interviewing technique as well, but it's a way to find evidence in a funnel type of approach. We're looking for the body first, and then we're looking for obvious signs of evidence, and then as you get closer and closer into more detail, more thorough, your more directed searches, because you are able to go back into all of those places and all of those properties. That's the methodology. So you go back and do the search, again, wasting manpower. And as you hear officers testify throughout this case, when they testify on the witness stand, remember that funnel approach, remember that kind of methodology. Make no mistake, the first night they are looking for Teresa and they are hoping to find her alive. When that was unsuccessful, the next morning on the 6th, Mr. Fassbender, Mr. Wiegert were able to secure some help. They needed bodies, they needed some cops, they needed some volunteers, and so they got volunteer firefighters from all over the Manitowoc and Calumet County areas. And they all showed up in force, in mass, on the morning of Sunday, November 6th. For the first time ever, every one of those 4,000 vehicles was opened and searched. Every one of those 4,000 trunks was opened by a firefighter with a police officer with them looking for the body of Teresa Halbach. Also on Sunday, November 6th, a firearm was found or recovered. It was actually found the evening before, but it was seized. It was recovered. It was hanging over the bed of the defendant, Steven Avery. He thought it was appropriate to recover that as a piece of evidence. In fact, it was. Okay, so that he relates the fact that because it was hung up above the bed, this gun, that it was Steven Avery asserting his power as a man. I don't know. I don't know. He made that weird correlation. Another piece of evidence was seized on Sunday the 6th. It was what we believe the last recorded voice of 25-year-old Teresa Halbach, when Mr. Avery, the evidence will show, made arrangements to have this young woman come out to his property that afternoon. He didn't use his own name. He didn't use the name Steven Avery, even though Ms. Halbach had been out to the property, as I told you, a number of occasions before. Mr. Avery used a different person's name, and he used the name B. Jonda. The initial B stands for Barb. So that is, it's saying that it was most likely Barb Jonda. But when we called the Auto Trader magazine, people in Milwaukee, and you are going to hear from Ms. Schuster and Ms. Pliska, 2 employees of Auto Trader, Mr. Avery used the name and used the number for B. Jonda. And that's because that would be the number that anyone in the advertisement would need to call and use to make arrangements to see the vehicle. Not Steven. Steven wasn't selling it. So Teresa Halbach didn't know who B was, Jonda is, or who B Jonda is. You're going to hear evidence that Ms. Halbach called back the telephone number for Barb Jonda and just left her this voicemail. This voicemail is recovered. It was retrieved. You are going to hear this voicemail. See how wordy he is? You are going to hear from Teresa in her own words in this courtroom that she got the message that she knows that you want me to come out to the property. Teresa Halbach tells B. Jonda that she's going to be out there sometime after 2 p.m. that very day on the 31st of October. This will be important for you in determining a timeline. Where was Teresa all that day? Was this before or after she went to the Schmitz photo shoot and the Zipperer photo shoot? That's going to be uncontroverted. Absolutely, this is the last stop that she made on the 31st. That doesn't mean that's where her life was ended. That's not necessarily logical just because that she was last seen here or because this was her last appointment of the day that he must have done it then. 2 days into this, folks, we're now on Monday, the 7th of November, and the first results come from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The first results find several things. I'm not going to go into it. It basically says that they find BLOOD that belonged to a woman. They test it. It turns out to be Teresa's, and then they find a second little bit of BLOOD in the car, and they want to match it up to Avery. Yeah, they go on a while about it. All right, so moving along. If you guys want to read the full thing, I encourage you to go out and download it and read it. All right, so you are going to hear evidence that this bookcase was jostled about. So this is finding the Rav key and the little nightstand that he had. They're calling it a bookcase. You are going to hear evidence about this particular binder having been pulled out of the bookcase, and after the officers looked through it, how it was slammed back in as the bookcase was actually pulled out from the wall. And after jostling and after searching it, after slamming things around the altar, excuse me, and I didn't mean to say altar. So after jostling and after searching it, after slamming things around, and after putting the bookcase back in its location, you are going to hear this is what the officers saw. They saw a Toyota vehicle key in the bedroom of Mr. Avery. You are going to hear evidence that it had obvious evidentiary value. What the officers at the time stopped what they were doing, and investigator Dan Kaczarski of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department seized or took control of the key during that more detailed search. So where is he from? Dan Kaczarski of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. So they find this key. I think it's Colburn, finds the key, and then immediately this other guy steps in and says, I'll take that. Which is good, but was the chain of command followed? Chain of custody. Did they log it and do everything appropriately? I don't know. These are questions we need to be asking them, and that our defense team needs to be asking them. All right, so more detailed searches were also occurring at the same time of the entire Avery salvage yard, which included now officers, volunteer firefighters going through all of the cars again, 4,000 searches again. They did it all again. After the body wasn't found in their first search, they are going back and they are looking for items of obvious evidentiary value. So like the funnel said, you do it multiple times, I guess, but I mean, I get that. But do you have time to search 40 acres? I don't know. But then if you didn't, then we'd be criticizing law enforcement for not searching it. So you are going to hear testimony that they found something of obvious evidentiary value. They found the victim, Teresa Halbach's license plates crumpled up inside of a station wagon. How did they get there? Very curious. Now I told you that there were 3 important discoveries on the 8th. And the third, and perhaps the most important discovery that day, is something that's being referred to as a burn area. Again, just to orient you, it's the same kind of picture. Oh, I didn't mean rereading that, but it's so the burn area. We've gone over that and what it looks like, and we've talked about that in length already on my channel, and so I don't want to get into all of it again with these experts or whatever they call themselves. So importantly, that burn area contained human remains. It contained obvious bone fragments, even to the untrained officers that stumbled upon this particular burn area. Even when they called over the crime lab to process this particular location, it was obvious that there were human remains in this particular bone area. He's going to talk about how bones are identified. They weren't able to search the area because of Steven Avery's dog Bear, I guess, at the time. He wasn't letting them close, which is kind of funny. Skipping through all of this. He's talking about experts that are coming in, which he doesn't do a very good job explaining them anyway, so we might as well just wait for the experts to come in. One of the bones that was recovered was a long bone, and I'm showing you this for a reason in my opening statement so that you understand what we're looking at here. That we aren't just looking at some bone in abstraction. We're not just looking at some DNA profile. It's Teresa Halbach's shin bone. All right? It's Teresa Halbach's daughter, or Karen Halbach. Blah. Speak. It's Karen Halbach's daughter's tibia. And attached to Teresa Halbach's tibia was some tissue. Now, despite Mr. Avery, the evidence will show that despite Mr. Avery's effort to completely obliterate all of these bones by burning, to incinerate these bones completely, this bone survived. This tissue that was on the bone survived, which allowed a DNA match, which allowed the state of Wisconsin analyst, guess who, Sherry Culhane, when she performed an analysis of that tissue, to match it with the BLOOD found in the back of the SUV with a soda can. So they found a soda can in the car with Teresa's DNA. So they took a sample of that. They had a standard sample from medical procedure. They had so they knew her baseline, like they knew what her DNA was going in, and they matched it to, like I said, the soda can here and other areas within the trunk, cargo area where there was BLOOD everywhere. Ms. Halbach's life was ended on the 31st of October at the Steven Avery salvage property. Sometime after 2:45 p.m., you are going to hear from a gentleman by the name of Tom Pierce, who is Teresa Halbach's business partner. that she doesn't show up for work on the 1st or 2nd, and on the 3rd, Teresa Halbach is reported missing to law enforcement authorities. That's when the missing persons investigation from a law enforcement standpoint begins. I think, if you will, as to the feelings of the Halbach family and friends and how worried they are. Okay, I'm sorry, but they're just trying to play on sympathy. But on the 4th, you are going to hear from a witness named Ryan Hilligus, who helped coordinate the citizen search efforts, which Ryan Hilligus I have talked about in my streams before. He was very much still involved in Teresa's life, even though he was an ex-boyfriend, and we don't really know why. He was still hanging around the picture. Were they just friends? Was he trying to get more? Was he trying to get her back? Like, what, I don't know what their dynamic was, and I would really love to know. I don't think anyone's ever come out and said anything about that, but I mean, there's always been speculation, but I don't think any real proof has come out about it. So anyways, moving on. On the 5th, we know that Teresa's vehicle was found at the Avery salvage property. You will hear that search warrants were obtained. You will hear that during the course of this case, that a search warrant is nothing more than a mere piece of paper. It's a judicial authorization. A judge authorizes law enforcement officers to search the property in private areas, and we got many, many search warrants in this case and searched for her body. Hello? Okay. My mic. Sometimes the cord decides I'm just going to go for 1 second. Just a second. And then it'll come back. It's weird. So I apologize. Alright, so where was I? Alright, so Mr. Firearms in Mr. Avery's bedroom. It was above the bed. Okay, blah, blah, blah. On that Sunday, we don't have any results yet. So, BLOOD on the... Hold on, the dog needs something. Here you go. Get off the blanket, and then I can put it on you. Yeah, here you go. She's such a goof. You're a goof. Okay. I don't know if you guys could hear her, but she's part pug. She's a mutt of all things, but she has like that pug snort. She's got the little pug nose. It's cute. Anyways, all right. So we search for the first time all the junked vehicles. At least all of the trunks are searched, and Mr. Avery's burn barrel is discovered and searched, and other things will happen, and you are going to hear from other officers that the surrounding areas, not just the 40 acres, but hundreds of acres of gravel pits and the like, are being searched in those early days. On Tuesday, perhaps the most important of all of the days, as far as the discoveries go, those 3 critical discoveries are made: the Toyota key, the license plates, and the burn area behind the defendant's property. They didn't find that before? Okay. On Wednesday, the 9th, there is an identification made of male BLOOD in the victim's vehicle. So that's the other thing that Sherry Culhane was doing, was besides identifying Teresa's DNA inside that vehicle, she was also looking for Steven's BLOOD to match something, the keys, the car, which the samplings have always been a mystery. The quantity and the grade of it versus what it should be versus what they got in some instances just didn't make any sense, and it almost does seem like it could have been planted, fudged, some swab of Steven's swabbed onto the car. It easily could have been planted if law enforcement knew where it was, if they found it first. which Colburn called and reported the license plate. He didn't report it. He called in and asked, "Is that the license plate we're looking for?" The woman confirmed. He just said, "Okay, thanks," and hung up. So I think they found the car. I don't know if law enforcement planted it on the property or if they had people do that for him, which might have been Bobby. If they knew Bobby was guilty, but they wanted to get Steven anyways, or maybe it was, I just lost train of thought. I don't know. Anyways, let's move on. All right, so you will hear on the 10th. On Thursday, the burn area is further excavated by arson investigators and other crime. Okay, so he just keeps going on and on. And finally, on Friday, the 11th, the female BLOOD that was found, the great pool, if you will, of female DNA in the cargo area is now matched. It's determined to match the soda can and the saliva of Teresa's. So then he talks about the science part of it, and Mr. Gahn, the lawyer, the third lawyer in from your left, is going to be talking to the DNA experts, and he's our DNA guy if we need to hear about DNA. So again, Sherry Culhane, almost unbelievably, is the journalist that exonerates Mr. Steven Avery several years earlier. She's the same analyst that does the detailed DNA work on Mr. Avery's work with Innocence Project and frees Mr. Avery from his incarceration. So obviously, she knows what she's doing and she never makes mistakes because she was the same woman who got him off for his wrongful conviction. We admit that was wrongful. We admit he shouldn't have been there. She got him off though. Like, whoopsie yes on us, but she got him off. So that's, enough to just forgive all of the county's sins against Steven Avery. The same woman, Sherry Culhane, processes this vehicle. So she exonerated Steven, and she is now putting him behind bars. She processed the vehicle because she's the unit head, because this is such an important case. She does the work herself. She does all of the analysis of all of the blood that's found in these cases. So let me ask, was there a second individual there while she was doing this? Or was she just all by herself and analyzing things? Makes you wonder, because if she didn't have someone else in the room at all times, I'm just curious how we can trust her. All right, we're gonna skip through all of this. Talk about the BLOOD in the back of the trunk or the cargo area. Talks about the male BLOOD that was in the SUV on Wednesday, the 9th of November. Steven Avery subjected to a very thorough medical examination, again a result of a warrant as a result of a judicial authorization to do that particular kind of examination. So he had to get swabbed all over his body. They do groin swabs, they do swabs in your cheeks, they do swabs everywhere. And he was subjected to this. So they had swab samples. They had, the touch DNA that they say was on the hood latch, which came back like extremely, extremely high. That's something that was most likely planted because his touch DNA shouldn't have come back with like that huge of results. Anyways, I don't know. I can't speak to it as articulately as the experts can, but it's just, there's so many glaring errors in this case. And a lot of it has to do with the prosecution. And what they found was very, very deep cut to Mr. Avery's right middle finger, importantly on the outside of his right middle finger. And that's where the cut was. So, of course, that has to be the BLOOD that they found in the car. This cut is actively bleeding on the 31st of October. We saw a picture of it and it wasn't actively bleeding. It still looked coagulated. You know, your skin and your blood starts to coagulate. Your skin starts to get like thin, a thin layer over it so that it doesn't continue to be dripping actively. But it wasn't. It looked like it had stopped, but not to Ken Kratz. He wants to make sure that we all know it's actively bleeding, so he would have gotten blood everywhere. Because it wasn't bandaged, obviously. So dumb. Alright, so I guess thankfully for the state. And as a jury, I hope at the conclusion of this case you will say, thankfully for you, because DNA analysis was then possible because of his actively bleeding, of his leaving his DNA behind inside of Teresa's vehicle. Ms. Culhane will tell you that the defendant's BLDD was found in at least 6 places in Teresa Halbach's SUV, including the rear passenger door, smeared or wiped on the rear door. So how is it smeared or wiped? Why would his blood be smeared, or I don't know, like he's doing it on purpose, smearing it and wiping it? Or someone had a sample of his blood and went, nope, that sounds more plausible to me. There's a front door, there's a back door, kind of like a 4-door car. It was the back door, and it's along the edge. And like, people understand what a SUV is, buddy. That's Steven Avery's blood. That's how much blood was left on the side of the door. We have heard about the defendant's BLDD on the ignition that positively matched that of Steven Avery. So many loud cards around here. As you think about this case, I will argue at the end of this case, but there isn't any secret, and the defense understands this as well, an actively bleeding middle finger. And when you look at the smear, kind of visualize turning the ignition and how that can smear from the outside of the finger and leave that particular kind of DNA evidence. So I believe that Renee Zellweger, this never made sense to me either, and I believe that Renee Zellweger, no, Kathleen Zellner, not the actress Renee Zellweger, but Kathleen Zellner, the defense attorney. She, I think, in my opinion, debunked this because they did experiments. They dripped a bunch of fake blood on somebody's hand and tried to reenact this. And there was absolutely no way, because there's like inches in between. There's no way, like, even if you had your finger out, like, there's just no way. And I don't think that it ever could have happened like that. So, I question that smear. Moving on. So, other places that the defendant bled inside of the vehicle's car included her CD case, both front seats, and droplets of Mr. Avery's blood on it, the rear tailgate. Remember, I told you there was a droplet of Teresa's blood because Mr. Avery is actively bleeding. There is a droplet of his blood as well. And also, on the front console floor is kind of up in that particular area. Alright, so he talks about skin cells, the difference between skin cells and blood DNA and other things like that. You've heard a suggestion already in which there will be evidence in this case that the battery was disconnected on Ms. Halbach's vehicle. We'll tell you, or at least we'll argue as to why that happened, but importantly, in reaching up underneath the hood to open up Teresa's vehicle, Mr. Avery was kind enough to leave his DNA on the hood latch. Okay, that will come from Sherry Culhane as well. In handling Ms. Halbach's key, that starts the ignition and putting it into his bedroom, Mr. Avery was kind enough to leave his DNA on that portion of the Toyota key that was found. So that's part of the science. Okay. The Toyota key was found with absolutely no traces of Teresa on it, which to me suggests somebody wiped that key down, cleaned it off, and somehow got Steven's DNA on there. If they had a sample, which we know they did, it could have easily been done. And it's pretty disgusting that law enforcement and the DA's office and people, in power can do things like this to just the regular folk. Now he talks about we're going to have a forensic odontologist come and testify. They're also going to have an anthropologist that's going to come and talk about the bones and how she knows that these bones were shot through her. There was she can identify all of the bones, and she also is identifying the damage to the bones that includes bullet shots. So that's basically what this woman's going to testify to. The parts of the skull in the picture that you see, this brilliant woman is going to tell you that this isn't just part of the skull, but it's a little piece behind the ear, and it has the damage, the defect that's caused. The evidence is going to show you that you are looking at the inside from the outside, the inside of Teresa's skull out, the circular or half circle, because this isn't the full piece. This is a piece of the important piece here is extremely important. The defect, the damage. My God, can you spit it out? I know I have trouble speaking, but he's worse. The defect, the damage here, the testimony will be, is caused by a high velocity projectile. We talk about, or we take this same bone fragment, and you are going to hear evidence about other experts, and it allows other analysts of this particular piece of bone, this particular piece of cranium. Someone takes x-rays, and then they're able to determine stuff from it there. They think that there is this other expert is the medical examiner of Milwaukee County. He is going to, is it him and Eisenberg? They're going to talk about the gunshot residue, GSR, the gunshot residue that ends up inside of her skull. So they talk about that. They talk more about the burn barrel. He just is so wordy in his opening. So it's just, I feel like we don't need it all. We've been through all of this anyways. And the things that didn't burn up were electronic components. All of these electronic components were found in Mr. Avery's burn barrel. This is other evidence. This is more evidence, not just the evidence, not just the DNA, not just the blood, but the conclusion of the case will be the other evidence. The electronic components included Teresa's cell phone. You will hear evidence she had a Motorola Razr cell phone. And when we look at and when the experts show you those electronic components that are found within the burn barrel, you will recognize, or some of you might recognize, the Motorola sign. You are going to hear about a digital camera that Teresa Halbach had. And when you take a picture with the digital camera, that photo, the image that you take with the digital camera leaves a signature. It leaves an electronic print behind, or imprint. It gives you an incredible amount of information, gives you the date that the picture was taken, tells you things about the picture itself, including the kind of camera that was used. And you are going to learn, and you are going to see at least 6 different pictures that were taken at Steven Avery's property by Teresa Halbach, and all 6 of those include that little imprint, include that signature, will tell you conclusively that Teresa uses the Canon PowerShot. So you're going to see in the data that the last images she had on there were obviously from her camera. You're going to learn that in Mr. Avery's garage, after shooting the bullets into 25-year-old Teresa Halbach, they ejected what are called shell casings. Those are the little brass casings that come out of the gun after you shoot it. Well, it's possible for tool mark experts from the crime lab to match up those shell casings with a specific gun. No, no, it is not. It is not possible, and you just told the jury something false again. There is no such thing as an accurate tool mark uh, reading or whatever. These tool mark experts, you can't you can't test every single gun in the world, so you don't know that every single gun makes every single, you just can't make sure, or you can't definitively say. You can say these tool markings look consistent with tool markings that came out of the gun when I shot it, but you cannot say for sure. You just can't. Anyways, so they're trying to match it up with a specific gun, the 22 caliber rifle that was hanging over his bed. They're trying to get it on. And they're talking about the bullets. Through a more detailed search of the garage, 2 bullet fragments were found in Avery's garage. One of those bullet fragments, after going through Teresa Halbach, included Teresa's DNA. And that is questionable also, because I think Renee Zellweger and Kathleen Zellner, or one or the other, has already debunked that it did not go through her head. And there was a waxy material and wooden material on the bullet fragments. So under an extreme microscope, they looked at these bullet fragments and they were waxy. There was a wax something film on them, which we now know that they immediately, law enforcement took items of Teresa's to identify her DNA, and one of those things was her chapstick. So somebody could have easily rubbed some chapstick on a bullet and said, oh yeah, now this is going to test for Teresa's DNA because her DNA is on it. And they're not going to know that it came from wax unless somebody does a huge microscopic image of it and sees that there's wax on it. So it's just an interesting find. This case is just fascinating, and there's so many aspects to it. I can't even cover all of it, but I can't even get through the opening statements without stopping. Jeez. Okay, sorry. Maybe I'm full of words today, not Ken Kratz. So the bullets, okay. The bullets came back with, and they were apparently, they had gone through Teresa's skull. You will hear about things like phone calls. You'll hear about how phone calls can't be changed in the records. And we can provide a timeline as to when certain things happen. When Mr. Avery calls for Teresa, when he calls her 2 times before she ever got there, and when he places what we're going to call an alibi call 2 hours after she's already on the property. You're going to hear about all of those kinds of calls. And as I mentioned, at least briefly before, other analysis of bone and tissue, other things to point to if in fact the state even questions whose bones and whose tissue it is behind Mr. Avery's property. Lastly, I just want to remind you of the kinds of exhibits that you're going to hear in this case. You're going to hear items that were seized, stuff that was seized from the scene, from Mr. Avery's property. You are going to get photographs from out of the scene, but you are also going to see photographs after the evidence was already obtained so that you have a more pristine or a better view of some of this evidence. You are going to look at documents and records. You're going to hear from experts who will provide written expert reports and also summaries and demonstrative exhibits. Blah, blah, blah. Finally, audio, video. What does he say here? I don't know. Oh, more about the exhibits. Remember I told you before, just talking about different kinds of photos, about those pictures that Teresa took, those 6 different photos. This is one of them. It was taken on June 20th by Teresa. It shows very clearly Mr. Avery's trailer, his garage. It's clear through Auto Trader magazine when Mr. Avery, in June of this year, tried to sell this particular trailer. Teresa Halbach took this picture. Again, with a Canon Power Shot, you will hear all those kinds of things. But the reason, at least for this part of the presentation, I'm showing you this is it tells you a difference between a scene photo and things that I mentioned at least briefly before. Computer generated scene models, they're going to have one in their presentation. Again, this isn't clear. This is a provided by Mr. Austin, but you will note that something, okay, blah, blah, blah. Let's move it along. So one of the experts did a bunch of measurements of the crime scene. There are 4,100 measurements that make everything geometrically perfect, geometrically accurate to within an inch. But these kinds of models should assist you. Since it's the middle of February, we're not going to be traipsing off to the Avery property. So there's that. Is he done yet? No, he's still talking about the bullets. So there was 2 bullets. One of the bullets, number 9, which was found in the crack of the cement that was not cleaned up in this case. The tent number 23A underneath what was an air compressor, the evidence is going to show is the bullet that Teresa left her DNA on for you. Underneath that air compressor is where they recovered the second bullet. So it is, or it has been known that the gentlemen of the Avery property shoot guns, and they go and shoot at the garage, at like the back of the garage or something, to shoot it into the wall. So that that's their target. I don't know. This is a country thing you do out in the boonies in Wisconsin for some reason. But I don't live there. It's not my thing. But that's what they do, and that's cool. So that's what I believe that there's these bullets came from. I mean, people shoot on the property all the time. They go hunting all the time. So it is not unusual for bullets to be there. The fact that they are saying that they went through Teresa's brain, that's another story, because I don't fully believe that they did. And on top of it, that was the other point I really wanted to make, and then I'll shut up, is the garage and Steven's trailer. Neither one of them were clean. So, I mean, you could say they're pack ratty, The place looks like they're pack rats. They live like they're pack rats. The garage is, it's got a lot of stuff in it. It's not organized. It's messy. It's very messy and dusty and dirty. Yet, all that layer of dust and dirt and whatever, and that's still intact, but somehow they cleaned. And they cleaned every trace of what they did of Teresa in his trailer, bedroom, and in the garage. That makes absolutely no sense. People, use your brains. I'm sorry. There's no evidence. He may have done it, okay? But if he did not do it the way that the state says he did it. So I need more proof. I need more evidence. That's where I'm at. But I've made my decision already. All right, so finally, the kinds of witnesses that you are going to hear from include citizens of law enforcement officers and records kinds of people. What? What are records kinds of people? Although most of those will be agreed to between Mr. Strang and us, as well as expert witnesses, you will hear from various kinds of citizens like Bobby Dassey, who is one of the sons of Barb Jonda, who you will hear testimony about. So we'll hear from Bobby Dassey on the stand. Bobby Dassey saw this young girl, later identified as Teresa Halbach, get out of her teal or blue or green colored SUV and actually take pictures of the van that her mom had for sale. His mom. Bobby Dassey is going to tell you that after looking I don't know. My mic keeps going out. Sorry. All right, so you will hear evidence that she was walking towards the main entrance of Steven Avery's trailer and that Bobby thereafter took a shower and left to go deer hunting, bow hunting, about 15 minutes later. You are going to hear from Bobby that when he left 15 minutes later, Teresa's SUV was there. So why would she still be there 15 minutes? It takes like 2 minutes to take photos and leave. But Teresa was nowhere to be found. I don't believe that for a second. You're going to hear that Bobby Dassey was the last person, the last citizen that will have seen Teresa Halbach alive. You are going to hear from other citizens like that, other people that will help place this case into context for us. Juries are triers of fact. You don't decide what is the law. The judge does that. But you decide what the facts of this case are, and the facts in this case aren't just going to point to who did it. It's not just a who done it case. It's a what happened and where it happened and when it happened. But we're also going to provide you evidence, not just that Steven Avery did it, but to the exclusion of all other people as well. In other words, positive evidence about who done know it, but also negative evidence of why that necessarily excludes others. And so you get to find those facts, and in the end of this case, you will search for the truth. And you are not to search for doubt. You are to search for the truth. What does that even mean? Don't search for doubt? That leaves us then with the end. I'm going to remind you through this case, I'm not going to apologize about it, but this is Teresa Halbach. I'm not going to apologize about the fact that this is not a DNA profile number. This isn't a box of recovered bones, but as I have mentioned before, remembering the humanity of Teresa Halbach, remembering who she is, what she meant to these people, is an important part of the process. Ultimately, this process includes assigning accountability. It will require you to assign responsibility for the unaliving and mutilation of an innocent 25-year-old woman. Young lady, he calls her young lady. I'm confident, members of the jury, that after the conclusion of this, that could in fact be a 6-week trial. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Are you done yet? Finally. I will ask at the conclusion of this case that you return verdicts of guilty. Thank you. Finally done. Jeez Louise. So then they get into a conversation, and I just wanted to, this is a sidebar conversation. Jury's not in the room, but Dean Strang wants to bring something up regarding the opening that we just heard. So, Attorney Strang says, I just have one quick matter, if I might. I decided against interrupting Mr. Kratz's opening statement because I thought this could wait, honestly. And I don't like to interrupt someone's opening. You're really not supposed to interrupt openings and closings, but people do it all the time. And I don't like to interrupt someone's opening, but probably in the first 20 minutes of his opening, Mr. Kratz explained to the jurors that the presumption of innocence persists only until that moment when the evidence overcomes it and proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I understand the argument. I understand what was meant. No ill intent was meant, but that's enough of a variation from the actual instruction that the presumption of innocence attends the defendant until after closing arguments and deliberations begin, that I simply would ask the court to repeat part of that presumption of innocence instruction this afternoon before I start. We don't want to make a big deal out of it. I just thought an abbreviated reminder might help. I also noted in the state's PowerPoint slide that explained the element of false imprisonment that the language during her lifetime was omitted. That's, I think, the kind of thing that the court already had covered and can cover again. Court says, all right, I do recall the statement regarding the presumption of innocence that you referred to, and I do agree that the precise extemporaneous statement for Mr. Kratz is not technically correct. I'm going to grant your request and repeat the presumption of innocence instruction before you give your opening. The other item about during the victim's lifetime, I think I covered in the initial instructions. Again, I am confident that with 6 weeks from now, okay, they'll have forgotten it. Okay, so there you have it. The noon recess takes place, and now the court gathers everybody in the courtroom and says, members of the jury, a question came up during break concerning the definition of presumption of innocence, so I'm going to read that excerpt to you again at this time from the opening instructions I gave you earlier. Then we'll hear the opening statement from the defense. So that's how they cured it. So defendants are not required to prove their innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty unless in your deliberations you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. Mr. Strang, at this time you may begin. All right. Now, we're going to dive in to Mr. Strang's. I just need a minute because that was a lot of reading. And I got a lot more to go still, so. I know this seems like anybody could do this and it's an easy job, but when you actually do it, sometimes your body, your lips, your mind just doesn't want to cooperate. All right, so we're going to move on to, now we're going to hear the defense's opening statement from Dean Strang. Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. This summer, it will be 22 years since the woman running on the beach in Manitowoc was arred and beaten nearly to death. The Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department investigated those awful crimes, and they charged Steven Avery with R and attempted M on that Manitowoc beach 22 summers ago. He said consistently that he was innocent, that he had not done it. No one believed him. No one but his own family believed him. And as that case was making its way through the Manitowoc County Circuit Court, just one county over, Teresa Marie Halbach was 5 and was starting kindergarten. Somewhere else, somewhere we don't know, a man named Gregory Allen presumably was laughing and planning his next violent R. 11 years later, in 1996, Steven Avery was trying still to make people understand that he was innocent. DNA testing was in its infancy. It was beginning to move into courtrooms out of the scientific laboratories, but we have come a long way. Just a few years since 1996, and it was not as advanced as it is today. And again, this is 2007, so it's still even more advanced now, where you can take like the tiniest of tiniest samples and repeat them and replicate them so you have a bigger sample. I don't think they could do that back then. All right, so, but in 1996, Steven Avery took a chance and had BLOD drawn, a little vial of it. It was sent off through the help of his lawyers for early DNA testing. It couldn't clear him entirely. It helped, but it did not conclusively prove Steven Avery's innocence of the attempted M and R of the Manitowoc Beach. And when the test failed to prove him entirely innocent, that BLOD was sent back in a box sealed with evidence tape to the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court. And there, in 1996, that blood vial, sealed in the box with evidence tape, took up residence in the now 11-year-old file of the 1985 case in a box in the open in the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court's office. And there it sat. And in 1996, here, just a few miles north of here, Teresa Marie Halbach was learning how to drive at 16, I assume, and the irony. All right. It is the Verizon guy who says, wait. Oh, we can hear you now. Okay, is that the Verizon guy that says that? Okay, funny. Teresa was learning to drive I assume, at age 16. And the irony is that the blood vial in the clerk's office probably is what ends up in her car eventually. That's where they think these samples came from. But they also had samples upon arrest. So, I mean, they collected samples upon arrest too. So they had old samples and new samples. They could have got them anyway. If they were going to frame them, they could have done it anyway. All right, so and time moves forward through to 2002. Science has also moved forward. DNA testing has improved, and a new effort is made to exonerate Steven Avery. Now, the blood in the vial in the box under the evidence tape in the clerk's office is not, you will learn, what is used for the 2002 and 2003 DNA testing. But some materials from that box, that file, the overall file from the 1985 case, some are sent to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in Madison to Sherry Culhane, and to whom Mr. Kratz introduced you. So, we got evidence being sent over there. All right, and the person from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department involved, lo, these many people years later, the department was but a person from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department who documented the things that were sent from the old court file to the crime laboratory, and therefore presumably looked at the box and assisted in deciding what to send. That person was, by that time, a lieutenant or a detective, now a lieutenant named James Lank. Now, Detective Lank was with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, had his office in the Sheriff's Department that adjoins or is connected by a small courtyard to the Manitowoc County Court, a circuit court, and the clerk's office. So the sheriff's office, the sheriff's department, adjoins or connects through a small courtyard to the Manitowoc Circuit Court and the clerk's office. So the clerk's office is in that same building with the circuit court. So it is connected by a small courtyard to the south of the courthouse. He was, as I say, a detective with the sheriff's department. Today he is a lieutenant of the detectives and leads the detective unit. He documented in 2002 that what was sent to the state crime laboratory from the file. 2002 is the year that Teresa Halbach graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay and came home a short distance back here to Calumet County to start off a promising career. In 2003, nearly a year after the necessary DNA samples were sent, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory was able to establish that Steven Avery did not R and beat the woman on the Manitowoc beach, as he had been saying all along. And because of the advance of science and the crime lab was better to do better than that, it was able to establish that Gregory Allen was actually the perpetrator. So now, unfortunately, in the time that passed, Mr. Allen had R'd violently and again because he had his liberty while the man did this time. Wait, what? Now, unfortunately, in the time that passed, Mr. Allen had R'd violently again because he had his liberty while that man did his time. But in the fall of 2003, as the weather was cooling, the state of Wisconsin, at long last, joined Steven Avery in a motion to set aside his conviction, and an innocent man also went home. Home for Steven Avery. Home is a salvage yard of which you have seen now many glorious pictures from high up, from down low, from angles all over. The pictures are a good deal more glorious looking than the salvage yard itself, but this was home. It's the only home that would take him back after this time, the time that he did. So Alan Avery, Steven's father, back there in the working shirt, just as you might expect, Alan Avery started the business nearly 40 years ago on the 40 acres and he scrimped to buy. He raised sons and a daughter, and they didn't wander far from the business. Chuck and Earl joined it. Barb works elsewhere, works in a factory, but lives on the property. And this is the sort of business where the family, as you saw, shares the perimeter of this property with the 4,000 rusting, decaying cars that are the refuse, the wreckage of other people's lives. This is not a glorious business, but it is a necessary business. It is a good business, and yes, you will learn. You have got to get your hands dirty if you're going to be in the salvage business. Not just dirty, you get your hands bloody because you are working with rusted, jagged metal, disassembling cars. And the dirt that grinds into your palms and that you find under your fingernails doesn't wash off at night. Yowzers. Okay, I need a sip and we'll be good to go. I mean, he's painting a picture of what it's like on the salvage yard. But this was his family's business and was his home. And he rejoined his brothers, Chuck and Earl, and his father, Alan, his mother, Dolores, on the family's property, and at the business he became, again, one of the Avery clan, one man in the Avery clan, and tried to resume more normalcy of life, sharing the perimeter of the salvage yard, not in a pretty house in town on a nice stone foundation, but in a trailer home, down from his sister's trailer home. But of them down from the double wide that Mom and Dad had and Chuck's trailer toward the back on the path towards the crusher. And it is, although not glamorous, a worthwhile business and its work with its own dignity. What would we do if we didn't have the salvage yards in which to find spare parts? I guess we would be reliant entirely on the big corporations that make the cars to continue to make spare parts. Blah, blah, blah. Talking about cars. All right, so now in 2003, when Steven went home, Teresa Halbach also went home. Her photography business was flourishing and things were going reasonably well. In 2004, Steven Avery filed a lawsuit seeking some recompense for the hole in his life. So some kind of compensation to make up for the 18 years that he served wrongfully convicted. The time that he had spent as an innocent man for the crimes that Gregory Allen committed. This was a serious lawsuit. It was in federal court down in Milwaukee, and there was no question but that a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and in the end the court system had gotten the wrong guy. And as that lawsuit crept forward, as lawsuits do, we came to October 2005. In October 2005, about the middle part of the month, James Lank and another ranking officer of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, Sergeant Andrew Colburn, Mr. Lank and Mr. Colburn both were pulled into the lawsuit, not as defendants or parties to the lawsuit, but as witnesses who had their depositions taken in the middle of October 2005. It's just very odd timing, in my opinion. It's just too coincidental to be a coincidence. And if I've learned anything in my 40-some years, I'll just leave it at that, 40-plus years, there's no coincidences. Everything happens for a reason. And it's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence that Steven gets railroaded for the unaliving of a girl just the same month that these depositions took place. It's just too coincidental. All right, so now a deposition, typically in a civil lawsuit, is an event where you get a subpoena as a witness. You come normally to a lawyer's office, the conference room, the library, the lawyer's office. Lawyers from both or all sides are there. A court reporter is there these days, often a videographer as well, and the court reporter swears the witness under oath. The lawyer asks questions of the witness under oath, and they are recorded, much as Ms. Teshanek is recording what we're saying right now. It must be the court reporter. All right, so there's no judge. It happens, as I say, typically in a lawyer's office. And these two men, Link and Coburn, were witnesses. They were witnesses about their own conduct. They were witnesses to themselves. Neither had been with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department in 1985, but an event in 1995 or 96 came up in that lawsuit. And as to that event, both of them were witnesses being questioned about their own activity and conduct with respect to Mr. Avery's imprisonment. By the end of that month, unfortunately, those depositions would begin to matter. And indeed, from the time it was filed in 2004, you will learn the lawsuit itself mattered. This sort of lawsuit, or the public cry of the innocent man wrongly convicted and imprisoned, has to be, as you will see here, I think, it has to be, as you get into the heads of law enforcement and begin to understand the process of law enforcement, this kind of thing has to be a nightmare for every good law enforcement officer. These folks do not want to put innocent people in prison. They want to put guilty people in prison. And when they get it wrong, when the whole system gets it wrong, there understandably are feelings of shame, embarrassment, anger, humiliation, conflicting feelings about this. This is a good cop's worst nightmare, made all the more worse by the fact that Gregory Allen, free, thanks to Steven Avery being convicted instead, Gregory Allen went on to and beat more victims. This lawsuit kindled real difficult emotions, and the focal point of these emotions, naturally, was the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, which had investigated the R many years ago in the Manitowoc Beach. So the same exact county that put him away was in this lawsuit because they were, yeah, you get what I'm saying. And so when October 31st, 2005, Halloween rolls along, Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Coburn not only have the lawsuit to contemplate, but now, within the last 3 weeks, have been made witnesses in it and had their depositions taken. October 31st, 2005 began at the Avery Auto Salvage Yard, much as any work day would. This was a Monday. The yard was open not long after 8 a.m. in the morning. About 8:12 in the morning, Steven Avery called Auto Trader down in, actually I think, in Hales Corners, Highway 100, down on the southwest side of Milwaukee, called Auto Trader, and as he had done a number of times before, and said, "We need a photographer, we need a car for sale." Now the car belonged to Barb Jonda. The minivan you saw computer images of and actual photographs of, it was there, it was hers, it was for sale. I don't expect there will be any dispute about that, and it was Barb's to sell. The calls about it were Barb's to take. The price was Barb's to negotiate with people interested in making an offer on the used van. I've never heard to dicker or negotiate. Is that a word? To dicker? I think this is just an error on the the court reporter's part. I don't think that's a word. Dicker the kicker. Oh, dicker. Engage in petty argument and bargaining. She advised him not to dicker over the extra fee. Makes sense. Okay. So the calls about it were Barb's to take the price. The price was Barb's to dicker or negotiate with people interested in making an offer on the used van. Did you guys like learning? Dicker. Engage in petty argument or bargaining. Dicker. I'm going to start using that in my everyday jargon. All right, so yes, it is Barb's car. It was hers to sell, and the price was hers to negotiate. Steve left B. Jonda as the name because that was the name of the seller. But Barb works during the day at a factory in town. She does not work at the salvage yard as Steven did. He leaves her telephone number because that's where the phone calls would have to go if there was an interested buyer. And this, you will find out, is not at all unusual or sinister. It doesn't involve luring anyone anywhere. There was a car for sale, there were photographs to be taken, and indeed, on that day alone, for Teresa Halbach, with the 3 appointments we know about, this was not the only appointment where the seller of the car was not the person whose name was given to Auto Trailer. Yes, this is true. The Schmidt's car was called in by and listed as an appointment for Craig Sipple. And that little bit of confusion was quickly cleared up by the police. Wasn't really Sipple's car. It was Schmidt's car. No big deal. But she thought she was going to see a Craig Sipple, not a Steven Schmidt's. She thought that she was going to see a B. Jonda, I suppose, not a Steven Avery, but here is what she knew. She knew the address. Steven gave the address. This is an address, as Mr. Kratz explained to you, and I agree, to which Teresa Halbach had been a number of times. Probably about half a dozen, 5, 6, maybe more times to take photographs of cars or the trailer for sale. For example, the photograph you saw. You saw the address. She knows where she's going, as you will see. This is not a surprise or a secret to her or to anybody, for that matter. Auto Trader could have figured it out too by going into their records and looking at addresses. Whatever. So as you will see, this is not a surprise or a secret to her or to anyone else. And at 11:45 that morning, she called Barb Jonda's number and evidently left a voicemail message saying that she would be able to be there that day sometime after 2. Now, this Manitowoc County area was Teresa's territory, so to speak, for the Auto Trader magazine. This was her freelance work, as I understood, not her main source of income. Her photography studio work, I think, probably was her passion, and this was a side job for the younger photographer to generate some more money. It is also said because she did these hustle shots that, she might have been even doing, with her photography business. There's been rumors, and I don't know if they're substantiated or not, but there were even rumors that she was doing like nude photography and sort of things that might be a little racy and controversial, and that might have been a little bit of a dangerous thing that she got into that she didn't mean to, or something. There were so many other things that they could have looked at, and investigators just narrowly focused on Steven. All right, so she had a territory for Auto Trader. Steven Avery wouldn't necessarily know what her territory is or whether she's the only photographer working it. And sometime close to 2:30, he's obviously getting fidgety. He makes 2 phone calls to her cell phone from his cell phone, and he uses the star 67 feature, you will find out, which, as I understand it, on Teresa's telephone, then no telephone number would come up. It would come up as unavailable or something like that, or blocked. But he is on his own cell phone, and he may not being entirely sure whose number he is calling, he may not want to be giving out his cell phone number. At least the second of those calls goes unanswered. And the time frame gets fuzzy here. Mr. Kratz said that it was late afternoon that Teresa arrived, and I'm inclined to argue with that. Although it is difficult to nail down, but I think the best evidence you will hear is that although Teresa Halbach is in the neighborhood of the Zipperers, who are really just, I don't know how far, but not too far down Highway 147, and then south towards Manitowoc a little bit, so they're in the general vicinity. And I think at about 2:15 she's near the Zipperers, trying to figure out exactly where she's going to get to the Zipperers to take that photograph of the car. But I think the best estimate we'll get out of the evidence of when she actually arrives at Avery Road, which is that gravel road that leads down towards first Barb Jonda's trailer and then Steven Avery's trailer, which you saw on the north edge of the 40-acre parcel. The best estimate of when she swings her Toyota down that gravel road is probably shortly before 3:30, probably not 2:45, as one of Barb Jonda's sons, Bobby Dassey, recalls it. Ooh, so Bobby Dassey's timeline is off. Interesting that now Bobby Dassey has been named as a Denny suspect by Kathleen Zellner-Zellweger. Sorry, I don't know. That's funny to me. All right, so why do I say the best estimate? Because there is a school bus driver. Two of Barb Jonda's boys, Brendan and Blaine, are still in Mishicot High School, and it's Monday, as I said. And they ride the school bus. And school schedules being what they are, of course, unless there is a really terrible weather or something, school lets out the exact same time every day that the bell rings and the kids run out the door. The bus is, oh no, my dog needs to go to the bathroom because he's whining at me. So I gotta pause. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I apologize. We'll be right back. Whoops. All right. Sorry about that. I was really hoping to get through this stream without them interrupting. We got close, though. We got close. Okay. So the bus is going to be leaving about the same time, and the bus driver will be driving the same route every day. So the bus driver, who's no relation to the Avery family or the Halbachs or anybody else for that matter, just happens to be the school bus driver. And her name is Lisa Buckner. Lisa Buckner, when interviewed by the police, says, at 3:30 when I dropped the Dassey boys off at the head of Avery Road, I looked down the road and I saw a young woman taking a photograph or photographs of a van. Now, Buckner actually isn't sure when she's questioned about this, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of the week, but Monday is the day that the young woman would have been taking a photograph of the van down near the end of the Avery Road. So she's got a pretty good reason to have a good bead on the time. She's going to know her route. This is something she's doing 5 days a week, and it's at about 3:30 that she sees this young woman down the road taking photographs of the van. Teresa Halbach does her business, and the way this works is the person selling the car then gives the photographer $40. The photographer makes out a receipt for the transaction, typically also offers the customer the current edition of the Auto Trader magazine, and leaves. And that's when Teresa Halbach did. Steven Avery last sees her going back out Avery Road and about to turn left to go back out to Highway 147. So she went down his road and then she's about to turn left onto the main highway. So now somebody clearly sees her later. We don't know who, I don't know where, I don't know when, and I, like Mr. Kratz, don't know why. I do know this, and I can tell you that you will hear this about the evidence. One of the things about the photographers who freelance or work at the Auto Trader is to go take photographs on appointments that have been set for them through the Auto Trader magazine. But there's another way, which is the hustle shots. We'll skip down. She did hustle shots, and we know that you're going to learn that Teresa Halbach was good at hustle shots. So basically, instead of setting up appointments through Auto Trader, she could just set them up on her own and then bring them to Auto Trader. So she could take pictures on her own with clients and not have to have that middleman, and she actually makes more money doing it that way then. So hustle shots make a lot of sense, but they're also more dangerous, and there's no record of it, and you could end up losing your life if you do one, potentially. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but it's possible. All right, so you are going to learn that Teresa was good at hustle shots. She drummed up a lot of these. She was likable. She was hardworking. She was good at getting hustle shots. I have no idea. I have no idea at all, and I don't think you will either, unfortunately, whether she had a hustle shot or 2 or 3 that day or not. It wasn't written in her calendar, her planner, but she could have easily been pulled. I do believe that she left the Avery property. I think Bobby Dassey might have followed her. Potentially, maybe. But I do think that she left the property and someone flagged her down later on the road, down the road. That's what I think. It could have been Bobby. It could have been anybody. She left the property, in my opinion. I don't know how. I know. I just know. I know she wasn't unalived in his garage or trailer. There's just no way. No DNA evidence anywhere. All right, so sorry, moving on. I want to get through this. I talk a lot, but so do they. So sorry, guys, you're stuck with me. All right, because we don't have video. All right, so but if in fact she's near the Zipperers at 2:15, and as I think is probable from the evidence, she doesn't show up to the Averys until about 3:30. It's possible there's a hustle shot in there, or I suppose stopping for lunch or something. We don't know. It's possible there are hustle shots that are not scheduled through Auto Trader after the Avery shot, because after all, I mean, if we're at 3:30, there's a good bit of daylight left in the working day, I suppose, but we don't know. What we do know is that someone sees her later, and Steven Avery calls her later. As a matter of fact, from his cell phone, again, he calls her at about 4:35 that afternoon. Why? Because he thought, I have got another car I would like to sell. I might as well, if she's still around, or if she can swing back, I might as well have her shoot that one too. But he doesn't get an answer from her. Doesn't answer the phone. When he calls at 4:35, he sticks around, and at that point, his girlfriend Jody Stokowski is in prison or in jail serving time for a drunk driving conviction. She's in the Manitowoc County Jail. Jody, you will learn, calls Steven regularly because she's in jail. She has to call collect, and you can't call collect from a jail to a cell phone. And I never knew this. I don't know I don't know if you can call collect to any cell phones from anywhere, but in any event, you can't call a cell phone from the jail calling collect. So you have got to call a landline. And that's disconcerting since most people don't have landlines anymore today. Why don't you just let people use their cell phones to call their contacts? Because that's where our contacts are anyways. Let's get to where technology is. But no. Our law enforcement likes to be in the Stone Age. All right, so that's exactly what Jody Stokowski does. First, a little bit after 5:30 in the evening, she calls. In jail systems, I don't know if you know this, but jail systems typically, and the Manitowoc County Jail clearly does this, cut off phone calls after 15 minutes. Inmates have a lot of time on their hands. Sometimes people they are calling don't. So the call just ends at 15 minutes. So Jody calls about a little bit after 5:30 on the landline, and then she calls again, but shortly before 9 p.m. and Steven is home. I gotta go get my dog. He's barking now at probably another dog, so hold on. I apologize. Dogs, you can't bother me now until I'm done. Yeah, we'll see about that. They love to bother me. I apologize. I hate pausing, and I can't pause the record button. It's so annoying. All right, so anyways, where were we? Let's get back to Jody calls about a little bit after 5:30 on the landline, and then she calls again. I don't know, my hearing just went wacky. And Steven is home. So she calls again at 9 p.m. and 5:30. Steven is home both times. Steven answers the phone in his little red trailer there both times. And both of those conversations go 15 minutes, almost to the second. He tells her that he's been doing a little cleaning. He tells her that his nephew, Brendan Dassey, is over. They hassle. They are inane conversations, honestly. But they are tape recorded because every phone call out of the jail is tape recorded, so we know what happened. Does it sound like he just ended the life of somebody? No. Does he hide the fact that his nephew Brendan from 50 yards away, or whatever it is, Barb's trailer, has come over? No. Doesn't have to tell Jody that if they were up to something no good, but he does. Brendan is around. And for all the world, as I say, these conversations simply are inane. They don't ring of someone who has just committed a crime of such magnitude, or in the midst of committing a crime of ending a life, or in the midst of mutilating a corpse, or falsely imprisoning someone. No screaming in the background. They are just inane telephone conversations between a squabbling boyfriend and a squabbling girlfriend. And October 31st comes to a close. It's about 3 days later, Thursday evening, about 5 p.m., November 3rd, and when Ms. Halbach reports Teresa missing, Teresa lives when Ms. Halbach reports her missing, Teresa lives almost next door to the elder Halbachs. I mean, the two houses you can see from the other on the dairy farm up north here in Calumet County, where she lived. She lived in a little farmhouse on the property of her parents, and she lived in it with her roommate, who she had only lived with for a few months. So the report goes to the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. It's a missing persons report. No one has seen Teresa since Sunday, actually, and the Calumet County Sheriff's Office responds, interviews the family, a couple of close friends, and learns very quickly about these 3 appointments that Teresa had on Monday. So it is weird that her roommate said that the last time he saw her was Sunday afternoon. And that means that she never came home Sunday night to sleep. Or so it seems, or I don't know. It almost seems like that's what happened. All right, so a couple of close friends, and learns very quickly about 3 appointments that Teresa had on Monday. Now, at least 2 of those, maybe the 3rd even, but at least 2 are in Manitowoc County, Zipperers and Avery, or Bijanda. But the Calumet County Sheriff's Department calls for help from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department on this missing persons report. That very night, 5 p.m., the report is made. So why are you calling Manitowoc? They shouldn't have been involved at all. By the end of the dinner hour, Calumet County is calling the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department for a little bit of help. And who do we get? We get Sergeant Andrew Colburn. And he's told, look, 2 places we would like to sort of check out and see if Teresa Halbach showed up on Monday, the Zipperer residence and Steven Avery's. Well, that's a name that rings a bell, you better believe, less than 3 weeks, or about 3 weeks, after his deposition. And it is interesting that of those 2 places that Sergeant Colburn is asked to check and inquire after Teresa Halbach, he only goes to one. He only goes to Steven Avery's home, and Steven cooperates with him, tells him essentially what I had told you about Teresa Halbach coming to take the picture of Barb Junda's van, doesn't clam up, doesn't even seem nervous, isn't uncooperative. That very night, November 3rd, around 7, when Sergeant Colburn knocks on his door. Out of the blue, the same night, Lieutenant James Lank, now the head of the detective unit in Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, calls Calumet about this missing persons report. Now this time on Thursday, November 3rd, let's be clear, this is just a missing persons report, a young woman who hasn't been seen for 3 days. It's in another county. It's not even Manitowoc County at all. And nobody has called for Lieutenant Lank. And nobody's called looking for him. But the chief detective of Manitowoc County takes it upon himself that night to call Calumet and offer to get involved in the missing person investigation, where one of the appointments was to be kept was Steven Avery. And the next morning, Lieutenant Lank does one better than that. He goes out himself to Steven Avery's trailer with another officer from Manitowoc, and he knocks on the door again, just as Sergeant Colburn had done the night before, inquiring about Teresa Halbach. Again, Steven Avery is cooperative. Lieutenant Lank asks, "Could I take a walk through your trailer? Can I look around? Do you mind?" "No, I don't mind. Come on in." Lieutenant Lank walks through Steven's trailer, sees nothing amiss, thanks him for his cooperation, and leaves. November 5th, Saturday, Steven has left to go to the family cabin up in Kravitz early that morning, where Alan goes every weekend, and most of the family goes up too. Steven has gone up on Saturday morning, but around 10:30 on Saturday morning, Pam and Nicole Sturm find the Toyota they suspect correctly, as it turns out, is Teresa's. As it turns out, is Teresa's in the far diagonal corner of the salvage yard from Steven Avery's yard or trailer. As you might expect, law enforcement officers descend on the property, and the first to arrive are Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department officers at just about 11 in the morning on the nose. And folks, from this point forward, from 11 on Saturday, November 5th, 2005, this is not so much a funnel approach as you will see. It is a tunnel approach. It is a tunnel vision approach to this case. That was brilliant. Brilliant, Dean String. All of the feelings about Steven Avery, all of those churning emotions, all of that within the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department floods out. You can call it tunnel vision. You can call it investigative bias. But from that point on, this investigation is about Steven Avery and not much else. True. Very true. From 11 in the morning on Saturday, November 5th, 2005, before the police say they have even opened the car, before they say they know of any BLOOD of any sort in or on the car, before anybody even knows whether this young girl has been hurt or killed, the focus is on Steven Avery. Other people are asked: her male roommate, former boyfriend, and current friend, Ryan Hilligas. Others are asked, so do you know anything about her disappearance? Did you have anything to do with it? All of them say no, and those statements are accepted. Not Avery's, though. Not Steven Avery's denials or expressions of innocence. Time and again, the police go back to Steven Avery and ask the same questions, and he talks to them every time. Even by the time his lawyers in the civil lawsuit down in federal court in Milwaukee find out about it and are trying to encourage him not to talk to the police, he talks. On the 3rd, to Colburn. On the 4th, to Link. On the 5th, to officers up in Kravitz. And on the 6th and on the 9th, he talks. And he is not believed. Sorry, my neighbors are out there and they're being so loud and annoying, and it makes my dogs loud and annoying. All right. So where did I leave off? He complied. He was cooperative all those times. He talked to law enforcement, and he is not believed. Do they want to go through his house? Sure. Come on in my house on November 4th, Lieutenant Link. After the Toyota is found on the police, and the police arrive at about 11 that Saturday morning, Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Coburn come in to work, and they too arrive at the Avery property. You will hear that Lieutenant Link now has changed his sworn version of what he arrived at that afternoon, of what time he arrived. And he has the ability to change his his sworn story about when he arrived that afternoon at the Avery property, because somehow he avoided signing into the log sheets that the Calumet County Sheriff's Department was keeping on that potential crime scene. He signed out, but somehow he managed not to sign in. That's interesting, huh? Sergeant Link signs out but not in, and we've got Coburn, who I just don't trust him at all. All right, so on that 40-acre parcel, after the Toyota has been turned over to the Division of Criminal Investigation in Madison, now as search efforts are to begin in that parcel, now the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department nominally turns over control of the investigation to Sheriff Jerry Pagel of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, the county's sheriff's department. Nominally that afternoon, control of this investigation was turned over to Calumet from Manitowoc because of the apparent conflict of interest that Mr. Avery's lawsuit represents for the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Now, if you are thinking, though, that the evidence will show that the Manitowoc County bowed out because of the conflict of interest after it turned the investigation over to Calumet County, if you are thinking that, it's reasonable, but you are wrong. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department stays very much involved in this investigation, and what does Lieutenant Link and what does Sergeant Colburn do by way of volunteering? Come here, I'm sorry, here. Cutie. She wants to get under her blanket and she was struggling. There you go. Dogs. Gotta love them. Alright, so what does Lieutenant Link and what does Sergeant Coburn do by way of volunteering to help that very afternoon, Saturday, November 5th? Do they volunteer to help look in the 4,000 cars? No. Do they volunteer to search Alan and Dolores's home? No. How about the pole barns or the outbuildings of the salvage property itself? No. They volunteer to search Avery's trailer, and they do on November 5th. They could have searched anywhere else on the property, but no. They search Avery's trailer. What does that tell you guys? Think with your brains. I'm sorry. I mean, it doesn't add up. They should not even be there. And once they get into that trailer with the search warrant, well, then what these two do, and there are two other officers with them, one from Manitowoc and one from Calumet, what Link and Coburn do is they say, don't worry, we'll take Steven's bedroom, and they search this bedroom. Now, this is a mobile home. If the bedroom itself is 10 by 12 or 12 by 12 or 10 by 10, I would be surprised if it was much bigger than that. From me to the wall in front of you is about the depth and roughly the width of that bedroom in the small trailer in which Steven Avery lives. They search, that is, Link and Coburn search his bedroom on the night of November 5th, and they find nothing of interest. They see the guns, they stay on the wall, but don't bother seizing guns until the 5th. They come back on those days. And it is Link and Coburn who come back the next day, not somewhere on the property, but to Steven Avery's trailer. I mean, that's very telling. On November 6th, they search his garage, The garage is actually between him and his sister Barb's trailer, but for our purpose here, let's call it his garage. You will find that the Dassey boys have access to the garage. Barb has access. The family has access to this garage. But it's Lank and Coburn and another detective from Manitowoc County named Dave Remaker who searched the garage on Sunday, the 6th. They find 10, maybe it's 11, something 10 or 11, 22 casings. And they pick all of those up. But remember, the bullet that's found under little tent number 9 on the picture that Mr. Kratz showed you, the bullet that apparently has a crack, or apparently was in the crack on the floor, right? Smack in the middle of the garage near the front where the door is, that no one sees or picks up on November 6th, 7th, 8th, and so forth through to the 12th. So yeah, nobody saw it then. Neither does anyone see a bullet back under the air compressor, but you will see photographs of the garage as it was in November 2005, not as it was in March 2006, when finally, lo and behold, why there's bullets, and why don't we pick up those bullets? You will see the garage in photographs, not computer simulations, photographs as it was in November 2005. You will be able to see that although the garage is very cluttered, there's no clutter under the air compressor. There's no clutter there. Where 4 months later, someone finds a magic bullet there as you walk into the garage looking at the floor. It's too obvious of a place. November 7th, Steven Avery's trailer is searched again. Guess who? Link and Coburn. Now, there certainly are over 50 law enforcement officers on this property 24 hours a day, well before November 7th, probably by sometime late the night of the 5th, certainly by the 6th. There may be over 100 law enforcement officers working this property, so why do you need the 2 that are in this lawsuit with Steven Avery? That's the thing. Like, the whole investigation should be thrown out now, in my opinion. It's tainted. They have got the family excluded. They have got the perimeter around the area, 40 acres and more. They are controlling traffic and entry. They are logging in who comes and goes. They control the place. And you heard Mr. Kratz say they have got any number of people searching, but it's Lank and Colburn, again, who are searching Mr. Avery's trailer. There is the northwest corner, or there in the northwest corner of the salvage yard is his trailer, and on November 7th, they find nothing of interest in his home. Tuesday, November 8th, they are back. They are back in Avery's home, back in that small bedroom, searching it for the umpteenth time, and now Lieutenant Lank, on what you will hear is probably the 7th search of the small bedroom, Lieutenant Lank, now, when he's the only one in that room, says, "Why, my gosh, there's a key sitting in plain view next to that nightstand." There is. You saw a picture of it as he found it, one solitary ring on a key, connected to a fob. That key fob is just like, and probably is, the one that Teresa Halbach's younger sister brought her as a present. One key, and I don't know what that means. Her younger sister bought her as, oh, the keychain, probably. The key fob. I don't know. All right, so one key and one key only on the ring connected to the fob. It's a Toyota key. So where's the rest of her keys, her house keys and all that? She doesn't keep that on the same key ring? No, it's just the Toyota key. All by itself. And the man whom the state would have you believe bled all over Teresa's car manages not to bleed on her key, or his home, for that matter, anywhere else, for that matter. His blood isn't found there, although apparently somehow his DNA is, but not his fingerprints. And more interestingly, although this is a 1999 Toyota, and I gather she's been using this fob, this key, the state believes, every day to start her car and turn it off Teresa Halbach's DNA and fingerprints are not found on the key. For good measure, on November 8th, Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Coburn searched Steven Avery's garage yet again. No bullets, no nothing, and the case against Steven Avery largely is made at that point. And a whole lot of it, as you will see, depends on Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Coburn. And both of them, have elected never to tell Sheriff Poggle, the man in charge of the investigation for Calumet County. They have elected not to tell him that they had their depositions taken in Steven Avery's case probably 3 weeks earlier. They didn't tell anybody in the Calumet County Sheriff's Department that. November 8th is also the day that the bone fragments are found in the burn area hardly 20 yards outside Steven Avery's master bedroom window. Hardly 20 yards. Small burnt bone fragments, human burnt bone fragments. But what you will learn, and you did not hear this morning, what you will learn is that burnt human bone fragments also apparently are found in one of the burn barrels behind Barb Jonda's house. Burnt the same way, fragmented about the same way, and apparently human in origin. Not Steven Avery's burn barrel, not the one you heard about, but there are 4 burn barrels to the southeast. This is the most distant corner of Barb Jonda's trailer from Steven Avery's trailer. 4 burn barrels back there for Barb Jonda and the Dassey boys. Burnt bone fragments. And there are what seem to be probable human burnt fragmented bones found in the Redont gravel quarry, probably a quarter-mile south of the Avery property. Now, I don't think that the state has been able to link, through DNA analysis, those burnt bone fragments conclusively to Teresa Halbach. But how many burnt human bone fragments are there supposed to be? And when you only have one missing person and the burnt human bone fragments in the Jonda burn barrel, about which you did not hear this morning. Yeah, Ken Kratz didn't mention the Jonda burn barrel. Those are fragments from bones that are not connected, not part of the limb, not connected to one another within the human body. Sort of the random mix of bone fragments, as apparently are those that are found a quarter-mile away to the south in the Redont gravel pit. This is interesting. And as you piece this evidence together, here's what you're going to have to conclude. Bone fragments, parts of this body, were found where they were not burnt. They were burnt and moved because, again, these fragments aren't connected to one another. It's not that, it's not that an arm could have been removed and burnt one place and the rest of the body another place. We have got the fragments themselves mixed up and found in 3 different places. The body couldn't have been burnt in that way. In 3 different places, or even 2, if you set aside the Redont gravel pit, these bone fragments were moved. Yes, you're right. The question then becomes, the question you will have to decide eventually, were they moved from Steven Avery's burn area to the Jonda burn barrel, or the gravel quarry, or were they moved from somewhere else to Steven Avery's burn area and maybe to one of the other places where bone fragments burnt are found? At least did they start in the burn area and get moved somewhere else? Okay, you get what he's saying. Unless they specifically cut her into pieces, burnt her separately in all these different burn areas, which seems ridiculous, then how did the burn, how come there are so many areas that found bone, burn areas that contained bone fragments? Because you've got at least 1 or 2, like in the quarry area, you've got the 2 burn barrels, Jonda and Stevens, and then you have Stevens burn pit. That's 5 separate spots, and there might even be more than that where the bones are. I don't know. So in the end, you folks are going to have to do the hard work and the hard thinking on that. But I think when you have heard it all, you will conclude that it's at least most likely more probable that the bones were moved to Steven Avery's burn area, not burned there and moved from that area to another place or two. Why? You are going to find out that there are better places, even on the Avery salvage yard property, in which to incinerate a body. The burn area is relatively flat and scooped out a little bit, but it's relatively flat and open. It's a burn area. Like many farms on rural homes, that they have these just folks that have burn barrels. You burn your garbage and debris from your yard and things like that. So it doesn't have well-developed sides to focus heat back inward. Yeah, so it's not as concentrated heat as a barrel, obviously, because that barrel keeps the heat in there. So you can't burn a body. It's impossible. People, I don't speak from personal experience, but just from my, my love of true crime, reading and watching it all, it's impossible to burn a human body just, out in the open like that. First of all, we're made mostly of water, so it's difficult to do at all. And if you do, you need a very enclosed, hot space. And a barrel might do it, but you might still have some bone fragments left if you don't, if you're not, I don't know. You could still have bone fragments left, is what I'm saying, but the majority of the body would be gone. All right, so it doesn't have to be well-developed sides. Neither does it have it doesn't have enclosed sides. It doesn't have an external source of fuel, but the aluminum smelter at the Avery Auto Salvage Yard does. Big propane jets, an enclosed area. It will take an aluminum transmission down to liquid in a few minutes. The wood furnace that heats the outbuildings of the Auto Salvage Yard, Chuck's home, Alan and Dolores's home, that's an enclosed area that will incinerate fuel in it very quickly. And because we got probable human burnt bone fragments found on the adjoining property, the gravel quarry to the south, we can't rule out other possible burn sites. And an expert won't be able to tell you what other possible burn sites there are. Expert or not, that's not something he or she will be able to tell you. But once it's more likely, as I think you will find it to be more likely, that the body is burned somewhere else and bone fragments then are brought to Steven Avery's burn area, then he's not guilty. Because if he's the one who burned the body somewhere else, he's not going to bring the bones back to dump them 20 yards outside his home. Yeah, pretty much. Neither he is going to dump the cell phone and the digital camera and the Palm Pilot in his own burn barrel. Too many other places where these things could be disposed of out of the salvage yard, whether the retention pond, the gravel quarry, or some other burn barrel in the woods. So once you understand that those bones probably were not burned in that area, the fact that they are found there, you will see, tends to suggest he's not guilty, not that he is. It is perfectly clear to anyone around this investigation on whom the focus of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and the other investigators, to the extent that tunnel vision, that investigative bias bled over into, perfectly clear on whom the focus on this investigation was. The police didn't end Teresa Halbach, obviously. They have that in common with Steven Avery, but they wanted to believe that he did it. They very much wanted to believe he did it, and whoever did end her or burn that body exploited that tunnel vision pretty successfully, or skillfully, but I'd say successfully too. All right, so suggesting that sort of tunnel vision, suggesting this kind of investigative bias, planting blood in her car, fairly serious allegations to make. In fact, I will take away the fairly. They are serious allegations to make. Understand that bias and tunnel vision are human anomalies. And if you conclude reluctantly that Mr. Link and Mr. Coburn, in addition to all the other interests they took in searching and focusing on Steven Avery, planted blood in her car, you will also conclude that they put it there because they figured it had to be there. It should be there. It must be him. This wasn't so much, I think the evidence will show you, an effort to frame an innocent man. It was an intense desire to conclude that he, in fact, was the guilty man, all other possible leads for information notwithstanding. It was an immediate focus on this man starting shortly after 11 a.m. Saturday, November 5th. But you do not have to take my word for that. I can make this work. I'm not as adept as it should be. I'm going to play for you 2 tapes. Okay, so we're going to listen to some audio. The first one is Saturday, November 5th at 11:35 in the morning, 35 minutes give or take after the Manitowoc County Sheriff first arrived at the Avery property because that Toyota had been found. Well, before the police say they opened the Toyota, before they say they knew of any blood, well before Brutus, the friendly cadaver dog, comes along with his hits, 35 minutes after the first officers arrived when the Sturms called and said, "Hey, we think we found something." What I'm going to do is scroll through a transcript that we prepared, and then I will play the excerpt of the tape for you. It is not a great reading. The transcript is not evidence. The tape will be, I expect. So if you think my transcript is wrong, listen to the tape. It's the evidence, or it will be. That's the tape that matters. The transcript may help you in understanding it. Okay, so Detective Remacher is calling in. He's asking for dispatch. Dispatch responds, I put unintelligible. I think it's go ahead, but I'm not sure. So he thinks they say the words go ahead, but he's not sure. Maybe you won't understand it for sure either. Detective Remacher says to the dispatcher, you will need to get a hold of the crime lab for their evidence response team to start responding to this location. Now, he's out at the Avery salvage yard, as you will hear. Dispatch says 10-4, crime lab out of Madison, Milwaukee, where our crime lab has branches in Wausau, Madison, and Milwaukee. The main one is in Madison. Detective Remacher says it's going to be the Madison response team, and he was right. Now Detective Jacobs joins in this radio conversation. He calls in with his badge number, his squad number. I'm in code. You will find out what that means. Anything you need other than a portable for Shutter. And what you'll find out is he's talking about a portable radio for Deputy Inspector Greg Shutter of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, who is, I think, the number 2 or 3 ranking officer in the department and who's probably also going out to the Avery property. Detective Remacher, now that I can think of it, Dennis Jacobs, let's see if this will work. Okay, so here's the tape recording. It starts out with Detective Remacher saying, need to get a hold of the crime lab for their evidence response to start responding at this location. Dispatch says 10-4, crime lab out of Madison, Milwaukee, where? Remacher says Madison response team. Jacobs intervenes and says 278, I'm in code, anything they need other than a portable for Shutter. Now Attorney Strang cuts it off, or says it cut off. Sorry about that. You will get a chance to hear the whole conversation. And it continues. Dennis Jacobs says, okay, other than the car, do we have anything else? He's talking to Remacher here. Dave Remacher says, not yet. Detective Jacobs, okay. Is he in custody? Detective Remacher says, negative, nothing yet. Not is who in custody, but negative. He is not in custody, nothing yet. Detective Jacobs, okay, I'll gather my stuff and head out. So here's the recording again. Okay. Other than the car, do we have anything else? Not yet. Is he in custody? Not yet. Nothing happening. Okay, I will gather my stuff and head out. Now that's 11:35. Back to the attorney string. Now that's 11:35. Is he in custody yet? Detective Remacher clearly, and I gather as I hear it, knows who Detective Jacobs is talking about, and we don't. 35 minutes after the police have arrived. And to get a better feel for that conversation at 11:35, we have to go back 5 minutes earlier when Detective Jacobson's calling in on the landline 5 minutes earlier. 30 minutes. 30 minutes after the police have arrived at the Avery property, after Teresa's car has been found there. Dispatcher answers the phone. Detective Jacobs, Katie. The name of the dispatcher just rolled into the parking lot. Can you tell me, do we have a body or anything yet? Do we have a body or anything yet? This is 30 minutes after they found the car. I don't believe so. He's reading from the script, the transcript. I don't believe so. I believe they wouldn't find the first bone fragment for 3 days. Do we have Steven Avery in custody, though? I have no idea. You can hear it yourself. So here's the tape recording. Yeah, 1 second to take a quick sip. All right, so dispatch says, good morning. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, Katie speaking. Detective Jacobs says, Katie, I just rolled into the parking lot. Can you tell me, do we have a body or anything yet? Dispatch says, I don't believe so. Do we have Steven Avery in custody? And the tape recording stops. So they stopped it right there. And then they started playing it again. There's more. Dispatch says, good morning, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, Katie speaking. Detective Jacobs says, Katie, I was just rolled in the parking lot. Can you tell me, do we have a body or anything? I don't believe so. Do we have Steven Avery in custody at all? I have no idea, is what dispatch said. I have no idea. Now I will finish it out so you can link it up to the call. The discussion with Detective Remacher 5 minutes later. Oh, I heard him say, pick up that party. Oh no, the dispatcher says Pete, who is just another Manitowoc County Sheriff's officer, is sitting up there waiting and stopping people from going in and out. He found someone with a body only warrant for our department. A body only warrant is an arrest warrant or a bench warrant where they are going to take the person into custody rather than immediately grant him bail. Okay? Do we have... All right, I will talk to Remacher. Yeah, your best bet is to talk because nothing has come through. We have the vehicle. That I know. But more than that, I don't know. All right, bye. Detective Jacobs, oh, I heard him say pick up that party. Oh no, Pete is sitting up there waiting and stopping people from going in, and that he found somebody with a body only warrant for our department. Detective Jacobs continues, okay, do we have... All right, I will talk to Remacher. Yeah, your best bet is to talk to... Nothing has come through. We have the vehicle. That I know. All right, thank you. But what more? I don't know. All right, bye. So you can take the tunnel vision and investigative bias from them, not from me. Now, in the end, when you have heard it all, there's not a speck of Teresa Halbach's blood anywhere in Steven Avery's trailer. There's not a piece of hair, nothing. Nothing to suggest she had ever been in that trailer. And only the magic bullet found 4 months later to suggest that she'd ever been in his garage. But there's no blood or any other forensic evidence of her in the garage, which makes me believe that the bullet had DNA planted on it. And when you consider the forces, the emotions, the very human failings at work here, it's no surprise that the blood from that unsecured vial in the box in the clerk's office that Lieutenant Lank examined back in 2002 ends up in that Toyota. Hazel! They're so loud. Oh my god. Sorry guys, that was loud in my ear. Because alright, so where was I? It's no surprise that the blood from that unsecured vial in the box in the clerk's office that Lieutenant Lank examined back in 2002 ends up in that Toyota, because that's where it ought to be. Is he in custody yet? That's what they wanted to know. Jerome Buting and I will not ask you to make that kind of snap judgment here. The Halbachs deserve better than that. The police deserve better than that. You owe it to yourselves in making that decision to do better than a snap judgment. A snap judgment 30 minutes after the Toyota is found. Jerry Buting and I are going to ask you to do your job right. Think long and hard about all of the evidence. By the end of the day, after the full and fair consideration of everything and everyone, the full and fair consideration that Steven Avery did not get in 2005 from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. We're going to ask you to send him home. We're going to ask you to send him home again. We're going to ask you to get it right this time. We're going to ask you to set it right when this case is over. And the court says, thank you, Mr. Strang, members of the jury. We're going to take an afternoon break and we'll resume in 15 minutes. All right, so that is where we're going to end off here. So we got through opening statements. Next time we're going to go through key witnesses and their testimony. I'm not sure exactly who for sure, but I know people like Ryan Hilligus. He's going to be our number one. Teresa Halbach's brother was interviewed. I'm trying to think who's up first. There's a few people up in the front of at the beginning of the trial that we'll get to. The state, we'll work on the state's case and we'll do some of the defense and then closing arguments, and then you guys can decide for yourselves, is he guilty or not? So let me know in the comments below what you think about this case, about the opening statements that we just went through. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the like on your way out. Thanks for watching. Take care. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.